Chapter 336. Looking at Palace Master Yuyue surrounded by the law of fire, Chen Daoxuan's face was extremely solemn. Palace Master Yuyue is not a sword cultivator, she is following the way of art. But after the realm of the cultivator's avenue reaches the realm of law, there is basically no difference between the way of art, the way of swordsmanship or other paths. The difference between them is more about the level of the Taoist realm. Jianxiu is famous among low-level monks, because Jianxiu has set foot on the first level of the Tao realm when he has established a foundation. Compared with low-level monks who take other paths, the advantages are naturally huge, and they are basically invincible at the same level. And in the Zifu period, especially the Jindan period, monks who take other paths will catch up with the Tao realm, especially in the nascent soul period. At this time, whether the cultivator takes the sword way or other paths is no longer the key point. The key point is the level of the Tao state, the number of comprehension laws, and the degree of integration of different laws. This is the case with the Palace Lord Yuyue in front of him. Although she is walking in the way of art, she has reached the high level of the law, and the power of this fire law alone is not under any sword repair of the same level. Around the Palace Lord Yuyue, the flames turned into blazing white, fist-sized vermilion birds. The flames of the vermilion birds danced gracefully, supporting the Palace Lord Yuyue like a flame fairy. Compared with the monstrous water potential that Qin Daoxian carried with the sword just now, the scene of Palace Lord Yuyue's hand is undoubtedly much smaller. But Qin Daoxian felt a deadly threat on these blazing white flames. Qin Daoxian knew that he must not let the flame vermilion sparrow be stained in the slightest, otherwise the body will be destroyed and the soul will collapse. The Lord of Yuyue Palace looked down at Qin Daoxian, and his red lips lightly opened. Since you have already made a move, try this move from this palace. Phantom is really hot. Palace Lord Yuyue gave a light drink, and the flame vermilion bird that only surrounded her, charged towards Qin Daoxian at a terrifying speed faster than the ordinary fifth-order flying sword. This moment, everything between heaven and earth, in Qin Daoxuan's eyes, seems to have slowed down. A sense of suffocation came to my mind. Can't stop. Feishua's sword can't stop it. The moment he saw the flame Suzaku rushing towards, this thought occupied Qin Daoxuan's mind. Crucial moment. Qin Daoxian couldn't care to keep his hand, and a transparent flying sword flew out from his dantian, which was the Chengying sword in the promotion state. The second law. In the distance, Palace Lord Yuyue saw this scene, and a shocking expression appeared on her pretty face. You must know that after a cultivator reaches the law realm, the difficulty of cultivating the second law to the law realm will suddenly soar by a notch. Because different laws have mutually exclusive characteristics. Not to mention comprehending the second law, that is, comprehending the second sword intent, is much more difficult than comprehending the first. The reason why many cultivators felt that the difficulty of comprehending the second sword intent was not much different from that of comprehending the first, or even easier. That's because his own cultivation base is high, his understanding is different from the past, and he naturally feels that it is less difficult to understand the second sword intent. In fact, it is more difficult to comprehend the second sword intent. Comprehending the third sword intent is more difficult because it is rejected by the first two laws. After that, every time a cultivator comprehends a sword intent or law, the difficulty will rise by a level. This is also the reason why Qin Daoxian only saw the four laws of the Great Tao in the true immortal origin realm. You must know that the fallen realm demon is equivalent to the Mahayana true immortal of the human race. The dignified true immortal level powerhouse also comprehended the four laws, which shows how difficult it is to comprehend the latter laws. A cultivator in the early stage of Jindan can actually comprehend the second law. If you wait for you to reach the nascent soul stage, then it will be amazing. Palace Master Yuyue's cold brows stood upright, and his whole body was filled with murderous intent. Obviously, she has already moved to kill Qin Daoxian, and she intends to cut off this future enemy for the Xianqing Dao alliance, especially their Qingwei Dao faction. Die! Palace Master Yuyue shouted angrily, and the real fire power of the phantom spirit broke out completely, killing Qin Daoxian. At the same time, Qin Daoxuan's Yingying sword also slashed head-on towards Palace Master Yuyue's phantom spirit with real fire. After the space law was embodied, the shadow-bearing sword, every time a piece of air was torn apart, had layers of folds that surrounded it. Until it collided with the Suzaku flame transformed by the phantom fire, the transparent blade was completely covered by the folds of space. One is the Suzaku flame transformed by the law of time and fire, and the other is the transparent flying sword transformed by the law of space. The two collided, and there was no earth-shattering sound. Instead, the layers of space folds around the body of the Chengying sword were easily torn apart by the flame of the Suzaku like a hot knife. Suzaku flames cut the spatial folds of the Chengying sword's body, and then wrapped around its body. Seeing this scene, Qin Daoxuan's complexion suddenly changed. Lost. Sure enough, with the late nascent soul's cultivation of the Nether Moon Palace Master, coupled with the law of fire at the high level of the law realm, it is simply not something that Qin Daoxuan's space law can compete with. Although the same level of space law has some advantages in front of the fire law of the Palace Master Yuyue is one level higher than Qin Daoxuan's space law. Coupled with her cultivation as high as the late nascent soul, she brought the power of the law of fire to the extreme. It is far from being able to compete with the space law motivated by the mana in the early stage of Qin Daoxian Jindan. Sky. The Suzaku flame broke through the folds of space and spread to the body of the Chengying sword. In less than a breath, the Chengying sword was burned into nothingness by it. This time, in front of Suzaku flame, there was no obstacle, and he rushed straight towards his deity. Seeing this, Qin Daoxian did not dare to keep his hand any longer, and hurriedly mobilized the Liangyi sword formation. With the power of the formation and the blessing of the mind, the laws of space and the laws of water movement are integrated again. The second fusion of the two was many times faster than the original fusion. Almost in an instant, an immortal sword exuding a terrifying slight potential appeared in front of Qin Daoxian. At this time, the Suzaku flame transformed by the real fire of the phantom spirit also rushed in front of Qin Daoxian. He didn't dare to neglect, and immediately controlled the brand new flying sword that fused the two laws, and slashed the flames of Suzaku with one sword. Boom! This time, a violent explosion exploded in the air. The blazing white phantom fire was directly smashed to pieces by this brand new flying sword that fused the two laws. In the immortal city of Jinyuan, shattered into countless flames, falling towards the city. Not good. Jinyuan Jinjuan, who was on the side, saw this scene, and was shocked. Jinyuan Xianqing is his foundation. Since Qianyuan Jianzong was driven out of Yunghua by Xianqing Dao League, Jinyuan Jinjuan has established a foothold in this Xianqing. For Jinjuan Jinyuan, this immortal city is not only the logistics base of the Xianqing Dao League, but also an important resource guarantee for his future rebirth, and he must not lose it. Think about this. Jinyuan Jinjuan didn't care about strengthening the airspace, and immediately waved his hand. A net pocket-shaped magic weapon instantly expanded, and took over the flames of the vermilion birds scattered in the city. But, he far underestimated the power of the ghostly real fire of the Palace Master Yuyue. This. Facing Jinjuan Jinyuan's terrified eyes, this fifth-order mid-pocket-shaped magic weapon was directly shattered into phantom fires of blazing white flames, which burned to a great extent. Just 3 breaths. This fifth-order middle-grade magic weapon is in a state of collapse, idiot. When Palace Master Yuyue saw this scene, he was so angry that he was speechless, and had to scold Jinjuan Jinyuan for being stupid. Without using the law, directly let the fifth-order magic weapon fight against the law attack of the same rank monk, which simply does not take the fifth-order magic weapon seriously. You must know that a fifth-order middle-grade magic weapon, even for a top true monarch, is not a piece of garbage that can be discarded at will. But he was so embarrassed by his pig teammates. If it wasn't for Palace Master Yuyue seeing that the situation was not good, and hurriedly withdrawing the real fire of the phantom spirit, this pocket-shaped fifth-order magic weapon would have been destroyed in her hands. Fellow Taoist Jin Yuan, this palace asked you to reinforce this airspace, don't you understand? Looking at Palace Master Yuyu's pretty face covered with frost, Jinju and Jin Yuan knew that the other party was really angry, and he didn't dare to argue. He has also reacted now. Even if he didn't go to put out the fire just now, with the strength of Palace Lord Yuyue, he would easily recover the phantom spirits that were scattered and shattered. Although Jinju and Jin Yuan's actions were not a disservice, it did make Palace Lord Yuyue lose face in front of Qin Daoxian. After all, his attack destroyed his teammate's magic weapon, which is not a glorious thing. Seeing Jinju and Jin Yuan's sullen attitude, Palace Master Yuyue snorted coldly, and it's not good to be aggressive. After all, Jinju and Jin Yuan is a member of the Xianyang sect after all, and is not assigned to her Qingwei Taoism. She scolded the other party, it was already the limit. Besides, at this time of the enemy, Palace Lord Yuyue couldn't care about such trivial matters as Jin Yuan Jinjuan, an ordinary Jinjuan with a near lifespan. She got angry just now, but felt that Jin Yuan's rash action made her a little embarrassed. Calm down now, Palace Lord Yuyue was horrified to find that Qin Daoxian had actually shattered her phantom fire. You must know that her phantom fire is the stunt that she has achieved since she broke through to the nascent soul period. There are as many as the Yuanying Jinjuan who died under her move. But today, Qin Daoxian defeated the phantom spirit real fire she displayed with the high-level fire law of the law realm. After defeating Palace Lord Yuyue's illusory skyfire, the Bingxian sword was split into two again, turning into a light blue Fei Shui sword and a transparent Qingying sword. Unexpectedly, you not only comprehended the two laws, but even merged the two laws together. Palace Master Yuyue stopped and looked at Qin Daoxian again. As far as I know, you are not a disciple of Qianyuan sword sect, right? Hearing this, Qin Daoxian frowned. What do you want to say, fellow Taoist? You are not a disciple of Qianyuan sword sect, why do you work so hard for Qianyuan sword sect? Palace Lord Yuyue persuaded, as long as you are willing to join our Xianqing Dao alliance, I hereby promise that the past will never be repeated, how about that? Palace Master Yuyue was completely convinced by Qin Daoxian's talent, and extended an olive branch to Qin Daoxian again, wanting to recruit him. It's a pity. She didn't know that although Qin Daoxian was not loyal to Qianyuan Jianzong, the Tai Shinshui he asked for could not be given to him by the Qingwei Taoist sect. The conflict between the two has long been doomed. It was impossible for Qin Daoxian not to Tai Shinshui, because that was the only hope for his 13th uncle to build a foundation. For the Qingwei Taoist faction, Tai Shinshui is the hope for the rise of the sect, and it is impossible to give it to an outsider like Qin Daoxian. No matter how good Qin Daoxian's talent is. Therefore, the contradiction between the two is completely impossible to reconcile. Seeing Qin Daoxian's firm face, Palace Master Yuyue sighed. Unfortunately, a peerless genius who is expected to become the heavenly lord of tribulation is about to fall into my hands. Qin Daoxian. Ben Gong will remember you. Say it. The aura of Palace Lord Yuyue changed completely. If it is said that the attitude she showed in front of Qin Daoxian before, has always been the arrogance of the strong predecessors. Her current performance is to regard Qin Daoxian as a respectable opponent. I saw that she slowly stretched out Bai Nin's palm, and at the palm, a thin red and golden line jumped in her palm. In the blink of an eye, the thin red thread and the thin golden thread were slowly intertwined, and in the eyes of outsiders, they became indistinguishable from each other. Qin Daoxian, although I don't know how you combine the laws of space and the laws of water movement into one, it is clear that your method of combining them is very crude, or very violent. Palace Lord Yuyue stared at him. Now, this palace will show you what the real fusion of laws looks like. The words fall. In front of Palace Master Yuyue, a golden fire phoenix appeared in front of her. This fire phoenix is not only several times bigger than the Suzaku flame just now, but the key point is that it has a little more spirituality than the Suzaku flame just now. In addition, every feather of this fire phoenix is lifelike, as if the real fire phoenix was resurrected. Of course Qin Daoxian knew that this was not a real fire phoenix. The real fire phoenix, even the one with the lowest strength, is above the true immortal level. It is far from what the nascent soul cultivator, the palace lord Yue, can drive. Although it is not a real fire phoenix, this golden fire phoenix also has a bit of the aura of a fire phoenix. Fire Phoenix was born with the law of fire. After the palace master Yue integrated her golden rule into the fire rule, and then displayed it with the phantom spirit real fire secret method, she finally had the charm of this flame bird. With the advent of this phoenix, before Qin Daoxian fell, Jinyuan Xiancheng was in chaos first. Even if the three middle nascent soul cultivators held Dao domain instruments to suppress the airspace, they could not restrain the power of the fire phoenix from spreading towards Jinyuan Xiancheng. True monarch Jin Yuan's face was ashen. He knew that this time, regardless of whether he could take down Qin Daoxian or not, his immortal city would be over. Without Jinyuan Immortal City as a foundation, Jinyuan Jinjuan has no idea whether he will be able to step on the nascent soul cultivation base after he seizes the house in the future. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel anxious about Qin Daoxian, and he even felt hatred for the top true monarch of the Qingwei Taoism, Palace Lord Yue. Because in his opinion, Palace Lord Yue can completely force Qin Daoxian away instead of killing him. Of course, Jinjuan Jin Yuan knew Qin Daoxian's talent. He also knew that if this son didn't kill him, he would become a serious trouble for the Xianqing Taoist alliance in the future. But what does this have to do with him? After all, Jinyuan Zhenjin's lifespan is only a few decades at most. Chapter 337. Qiang. A phoenix roar, like the clash of gold and iron, and the sound of a dongshao. Invisible sound waves swept across Jinyuan Xiancheng in an instant. In an instant. They passed through the airspace reinforced by the three nascent soul true monarchs using Dao domain instruments, and scattered towards Jinyuan Xiancheng. See. Jinyuan's hen's complexion suddenly changed, but at this moment, he was helpless and could only watch all this happen. Feng Ming's voice swept across the palaces and defensive formations of the Qiyan Immortal Mansion. In an instant, these formations and palaces were all shattered and destroyed, and the entire Qiyan Immortal Mansion was destroyed in one fell swoop. Far away. Qin Daoxian, who was facing this Feng Ming attack, seemed to be doing nothing, still standing high in the sky, staring coldly at Palace Master Yue. However, compared with just now, Qin Daoxian has already put on the fourth-order high-grade natal spirit armor on his body. In the dark, he even inspired the star's kendo map. When Feng Ming's sound wave rushed towards him just now, a trace of power inspired by the star's kendo map was forced to disperse. Seeing that his tentative attack was ineffective, the face of the palace master Yue did not change. He waved his hand directly, and the fire phoenix, which was transformed from the real fire of the phantom, fluttered his wings and charged straight towards Qin Daoxian. This time, the power of the fire phoenix is not known how much higher than the previous Suzaku flame. It was obvious that Qin Daoxian and Palace Lord Yue were far apart, but when he saw this divine bird with a real phoenix charm, he still felt a little bit of fear in his heart. At this time, on the transparent Qingying sword, an extremely strong aura suddenly erupted. At the critical moment, Chen Jingjian actually succeeded in promotion. 5-level top grade. Qin Daoxian's face was overjoyed. With the success of Chen Jingjian's promotion, his space law also moved towards a higher level. After Space Sword Intent is promoted to Space Law, there will be 3 changes, namely Space Cage, Space Teleportation, and Space Strangulation. Compared with the first 2 changes, the last Space Strangulation is the best at attacking among the 3 changes. At this moment, Qin Daoxian had a kind of enlightenment in his heart, and he gradually understood how the law of space broke out the strongest attack. These changes were completed in less than an instant. Although Hufeng's speed is fast, it is still half the distance from Chen Daoxian at this moment. Chen Daoxian didn't dare to delay, and when the two swords were formed, he used the power of the formation again to fuse the two laws of air and water into one. Next moment. The law of space is the main, the law of water movement is supplemented, and the immortal sword that combines the two laws of air and water appears in front of Chen Daoxian again. Space strangulation. Broken. With a loud shout, the immortal sword recoiled towards the fire phoenix at a faster speed, as fast as a streamer. Next moment. Two earth-shattering attacks slammed into each other. Just when the fire phoenix and the fairy sword collided. The sky within a radius of thousands of miles was dark at first, and then, a ray of light that was dazzling than the sun suddenly erupted. A bright little sun rose in the sky of Jinyuan Xiancheng. About 3 breaths. Boom! A terrifying explosion sounded. Sound waves, air waves, and various energy radiations completely erupted between Chen Daoxian and Palace Lord Yuyue. Jinyuan Immortal City, which ruled hundreds of thousands of miles, and some low-level cultivators who didn't have time to escape this immortal city were completely vaporized by the aftermath of their attack in just a split second. Boom! 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 There were 3 violent explosions. It turned out that the attacks of Chen Daoxian and the Palace Master Yuyue were too violent, and all the Dao domain instruments used by the 3 mid-nascent soul monks to suppress the airspace collapsed. Affected by the destruction of the magic weapon, the 3 nascent soul true monarchs all vomited blood and flew out. When they stabilized their bodies, they all looked at Chen Daoxian and Palace Master Yuyue in horror. Good, so strong. At this moment, the hatred in true monarch Jin Yuan's heart had long since vanished, and now, only the fear of Chen Daoxian and Palace Master Yuyue remained in his heart. Is this the strength of a top true monarch? The other 2 true monarchs of the Qingwei Dao faction said secretly. They glanced down. The Jinyuan Immortal City that originally stood here, has completely disappeared at this time, leaving only a circular giant pit. This is the reason why Qianyuan Jianzong rarely breaks out Yuanying level wars with Xianqing Dao League. The strength of the nascent soul cultivators is too strong. Once a large-scale war breaks out, even if one side wins, they will most likely get only a piece of scorched earth, which is not in line with their interests. The scene of the ordinary Yuanying cultivator battle is still like this, let alone the top true monarch. Sharp. In the distance, the Palace Master Yuyue looked at Chen Daoxian with a complicated expression and said sincerely. And Chen Daoxian was breathing heavily at this moment. In the battle just now, it seemed that the 2 sides were tied, but in fact he lost. In terms of the realm of the Great Tao, the immortal sword formed by the fusion of his 2 laws of emptiness and water will never be under the illusory fire of the Palace Lord Yuyue. However, Chen Daoxian's cultivation was too low. Only in the early stage of Jindan, this undoubtedly greatly dragged him down. After all, for monks, cultivation is the foundation. Without cultivation as the foundation, even if the Daos realm is high, it is difficult to exert its power. Because of the gap in cultivation, it will directly lead to the gap between the quality and quantity of the 2 methods. Quantitatively, Chen Daoxian has a 4th-rank high-grade fortune-telling white lotus, which may not be afraid of Palace Master Yuyue, but the qualitative gap is not easy to solve. Therefore, the power of the immortal sword formed by the fusion of the laws of emptiness and water is ultimately inferior to that of Palace Master Yuyue. The reason why he can stand here unharmed is because at the last moment, he activated all the mana and activated the Star Kendo map. With the help of the power of Xingqian Kendo map, the fire phoenix Yue of the Palace Lord Yuyue was forcibly annihilated. This made it appear to outsiders that Chen Daoxian and Palace Master Yuyue were evenly matched. In fact, in the collision just now, Chen Daoxian lost. Looking at Chen Daoxian, who was gasping for breath, Palace Lord Yuyue continued, however, even if you can survive under the real fire of my phantom spirit, how many times can you support it? She looked at Qin Daoxian, raised her right hand again, and suddenly, a fire phoenix, the same as before, whirled around her. Your mana is too weak, Qin Daoxian, you are sure to lose. Calm down his good breath, Qin Daoxian raised his head, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. That's not necessarily true. Hear this. Palace Lord Yue suddenly became alert. Although she thought that with Qin Daoxuan's mana, the attack of the level just now, the opponent would never be able to use it several times. But Qin Daoxuan's performance is really amazing, not like a Jindan cultivator at all, but a top true monarch with relatively weak mana. In the heart of Palace Lord Yue, Qin Daoxian was already at the same level as her. Now that the confident smile on the other side's face, how could she not make her feel alert? She did not forget that true monarch Ming Huang, a late nascent soul monk, died at the hands of Qin Daoxian. Just when she thought that Qin Daoxian was going to perform some kind of secret technique, Qin Daoxian took out a cyan spiritual flag directly from the storage ring. This is... Palace Master Yuya's eyes narrowed, and the expression on her pretty face was slightly surprised. Suddenly, she remembered the origin of this magic weapon. Michin Banner. Immediately afterwards, Palace Master Yue directly used the Dao domain to suppress Qin Daoxian and his surroundings, wanting to solidify this air domain and make Michin Fan lose the ability to teleport in space. Unfortunately, she did it too late. It is difficult to completely solidify a space without the blessing of the Dao domain of the nascent soul cultivator alone. Not to mention that Qin Daoxian still has the Star Sword Dao map in his body. Even if the Yue Palace Master uses the Dao domain magical tool, Qin Daoxian can use the Star Sword Dao map to destroy it in an instant. Too late. Qin Daoxian waved the spirit flag in his hand before he finished speaking. The next moment, his figure instantly disappeared in place. Ah! Seeing this scene, Palace Master Yue was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood, especially after seeing that Jinyuan Immortal City had been completely destroyed and disappeared. The Xianqing Dao League entered a fairy city, and the loss was so great that the culprit slipped away. This made the arrogant Palace Master Yue completely unacceptable. On the side, Jinyuan Jinjuan was so frightened that he didn't dare to come out, for fear of harming Qiyu. Half an hour. When Palace Master Yue calmed down, a true monarch nascent soul from the Qingwei Taoist sect flew up and said, "Palace Master, perhaps your subordinates can give it a try." Hearing this, Palace Lord Yue suddenly thought of something, grabbed the other party's shoulder, and said eagerly, "Try it." Yes. The nascent soul cultivator nodded and pinched the mysterious secret art. Suddenly, where Qin Daoxian was standing, a mass of breath was collected into his palm. The sky and the earth are boundless, the pursuit of thousands of miles. Fast. This nascent soul true monarch had a serious expression. With the casting of this spell called Tracking in 10,000 Miles, in mid-air, mysterious spell patterns appeared one after another. In the end, these spell patterns all point in one direction, southeast. Seeing this, Palace Lord Yue was overjoyed. Chase. Yes. The three nascent soul cultivators followed closely and flew toward the southeast. Only the huge pit under their feet proved that a shocking battle broke out here. 100,000 miles away. Southeast of Jinyuan Xiancheng. A space turbulence rippled, and then, a monk holding a blue spirit flag and wearing a blue spirit armor appeared out of thin air. Cough cough cough. As soon as Qin Daoxian showed his figure, he coughed violently. Although he used all means just now, he made a reckless move with Palace Lord Yue. But because the fire phoenix was too close to him, and all his thoughts were focused on the immortal sword that fused the two laws. To use the Star Kendo map, you still need to take back your mind. This action undoubtedly made him use the Xingqian Kendo map a little slower. Just this slight slowdown made him suffer the impact of some residual prestige from the fire phoenix. The impact of Yue, which was less than 1%, made this 4th-order high-grade power spirit armor comparable to the 5th-order low-grade spirit armor unable to hold up, causing Chen Daoxian to be injured. Chen Daoxian coughed twice, suddenly thought of something, and directly displayed the space cage, wrapping his entire body inside the space cage. At this time, about 70,000 miles away, the nascent soul true monarch who used the 10,000 miles tracking technique suddenly stopped and disappeared. "What's up?" Seeing him stop, Palace Lord Yue and the others quickly stopped, looked at each other and frowned. "Palace Master, Chen Daoxuan's breath has disappeared." "What?" Seeing that he was about to catch up to Chen Daoxian, his subordinates actually said that the other party's breath had disappeared. How can Palace Master Yue accept this? Suddenly, she thought of something, and her face suddenly became ugly. "I forgot, he knows the laws of space, and he must have used a space cage to wrap himself up." Hearing this, the true monarch nascent soul, who used the 10,000 miles tracking technique, shook his head. "It's not necessarily the realm of the Tao in the high section of Chen Daoxuan's space law. Perhaps it was the continuous use of space teleportation to escape the tracking range of my 1,000 miles tracking technique." Hearing this, Palace Master Yuyu's face became even more ugly. This scene was undoubtedly the last thing she wanted to see. Comprehend the laws of space, especially the monks who have reached the middle of the law realm, are the most difficult to kill. Because the opponent will teleport. If you can't beat the opponent, you can run at any time, and the nascent soul cultivator who understands other laws of space will not have this benefit. Once they can't beat the monks who have understood the laws of space, they usually can't even run away. Space teleportation is really difficult. It would be great if I reached the world realm. Palace Master Yue was unwilling to say, and she shook her head again. If she reached the world realm, she and Chen Daoxian had fought with all their strength just now, and if she didn't, she would kill the opponent directly, and there was no such thing as preventing the opponent from escaping. Thinking of this, she continued to say to the crowd, although Chen Daoxian may have teleported and escaped many times, it is still possible that he just used the space cage to block his own breath and make the 10,000 miles tracking technique ineffective. So we still continue to look for his traces along the southeast. Everyone carefully cover every place with spiritual sense, don't miss anything. Seeing that Palace Master Yue was so persistent, everyone looked at each other in dismay, and then bowed their hands and said, "Abide by the law of the Palace Master." Palace Master Yue nodded, "Go." The 4 of them searched again, but they lost the tracking of the 10,000 miles tracking technique. This time they searched in person, and the flight speed was much slower. And all this Chen Daoxian didn't know. He just took a cautious attitude and temporarily blocked his connection with the outside world with a space cage. Because he knows that there are many secret techniques in the Xiuxian world, and he can track the trail of the enemy from a distance. Now that his mana is exhausted and his body is still injured, there is nothing wrong with being careful. He plans to use space teleportation to leave here after recovering his mana. But before that, he had one more thing to do. Chen Daoxian immediately took out a small tower, and immediately, 2 figures flew out of the small tower. It was Jin Chanying, the grandson of Jinjuan Jinyuan, and his concubine, Xiling. Now, the 2 of them stood in front of Chen Daoxian, and the expressions on their faces were all very restrained. Just now in the small tower, the cave artifact. Jin Chanying and Xiling witnessed the whole process of Chen Daoxuan's reckless fight with Palace Lord Yue. Especially Jin Chanying, as a 9th-level cultivator of Jin Dan, in terms of cultivation, he is still above Chen Daoxian. However, in terms of strength, Jin Chanying knew in his heart that this fellow Daoist Chen in front of him might be able to stab him to death with a little finger. However, Xiling did not have a strong concept of the difference between the strength of Jin Dan cultivator and Yuanying cultivator. All she knew was that Chen Daoxian and Palace Master Yue fought recklessly and actually destroyed Jinyuan Xiancheng. You know, her family's residence is also within Jinyuan Xiancheng. Chen Daoxian unexpectedly helped her avenge her great revenge without knowing it. Chapter 338. Chen Daoxian looked coldly at the two with a cautious look, and said, although I used space teleportation to escape, the people from the Xianqing Dao League will definitely pursue me. If you follow me, you will only be in danger, so this is the end of our cooperation. Please leave by yourself, heard. Jean Chanying and Xiling looked at each other with a helpless expression. From the bottom of my heart, Xiling may be better, no matter what. She not only avenged her great revenge, but also escaped from the control of Jin Yuanjinjuan. But Jean Chanying is different. He was signed by Jin Yuanjin as a blood slave. As long as Jin Yuanjin does not die, Jean Chanying will not be able to live in peace for a day. But seeing Chen Daoxuan's indifferent gaze, Jean Chanying finally swallowed his pleas. He cupped his hands to Chen Daoxian and said, in that case, I will leave now, and please take care of fellow Taoists. After all, turn around and leave. Chen Daoxian opened the space cage, and Jean Chanying turned into a flash of light, and disappeared into the sky in a blink of an eye. Seeing this, Xiling also bowed to Chen Daoxian fuss body, and her red lips lightly opened. Senior is so kind and virtuous, I can't repay this concubine. I have no time to leave, and I hope my senior will cherish it. Saying that, Xiling gave her another blessing. Chen Daoxuan's terrifying strength in the battle with Palace Master Yue has completely convinced this Zifu fairy who has a mysterious body of 9 yin. Chen Daoxian nodded. Just when Xiling turned to leave, Chen Daoxian suddenly thought of something, raised his hand and said, Fairy wait, heard. Xiling's footsteps paused slightly, Lu Mei frowned slightly, she turned around with a slightly puzzled expression, and looked at Chen Daoxian. What else do you have to order, senior? Chen Daoxian nodded slightly and said, Fairy, have you decided where to go? This. Hearing this, Xiling hesitated. Yes. Although Xianyunsu is big, but now she is alone, where should she go? She definitely couldn't stay in the territory of the Xianqing Dao League. It is foreseeable that she and Jean Chanying will definitely be wanted by the Xianqing Dao League. Jean Chanying is okay to say, no matter what, Jean Chanying is also a late Jindan cultivator. If true monarch Yuanying does not take action in person, it may be difficult for ordinary Jindan cultivators to win the opponent. And her strength, although it is considered good in Zifu, any Jindan cultivator can easily take her down. Now that the Xianqing Dao League is in a battle with Qianyuan Jianzong, it may be difficult to assign nascent soul cultivators to arrest Jean Chanying, but assigning a few Jindan cultivators to arrest her is simply a piece of cake. Even if Zhenjuan Jinyuan doesn't leak the news that she has a mysterious body of Jiuyin, Zhenjuan Jinyuan himself will never let her go. Xiling didn't forget that she still had a ban imposed by Zhenjuan Jinyuan himself. Every time she thought of this, Xiling felt a sense of despair in her heart. In Chen Daoxuan's eyes, Jinyuan Zhenjuan may not be anything at all, but in Xiling's eyes, it is an irresistible terrifying existence. As for leaving the territory of the Xianqing Dao League, it is even more impossible to go to the territory of other sections. Although the land area of Xianyunsu is much larger than that of Wangxinghai, it is the same as Wangxinghai. All the treasures of spiritual veins are occupied by various forces. It is by no means easy for Xiling to seek a place to live in other realms. Even if she is lucky enough to escape the pursuit of Xianqing Dao League and Jinyuan Zhenjuan, it will be difficult for her to gain a foothold in other realms. In particular, she has the body of Zhouyin Xuanzang. In the eyes of other male cultivators, she is a sweet pastry with fatal temptation. Think of this. Xiling bit her rosy lips slightly, looked at Chen Daoxian with aggrieved eyes, bowed sadly, and said, the concubine really has nowhere to go right now, and I hope Qin Jinren will take her in. After all, Xiling looked at Chen Daoxian with affection. She was able to cultivate to the Zifu period alone, and this method of gaining sympathy from men was completely at her fingertips. What's more, it is a miracle that she can still maintain her virginity along the way. But Chen Daoxian was not at all interested in her appearance, and nodded coldly, I can take you in, but you have to promise me a condition. What conditions? Seeing that the temptation method was useless to Chen Daoxian, Ziling simply put away her pitiful expression. Wait until we are safe. Now I want to restore my mana, and you can protect me here. After all, Chen Daoxian ignored her, sat cross-legged in front of her, and took out a jade bottle from the storage bag. The jade bottle contained the 10,000-year-old stalactite that Fairy Qiyao gave him. Chen Daoxian opened the jade bottle to seal the ban, raised his head and took a sip. After half an hour, Chen Daoxian opened his eyes energetically. About 10 feet away from him, Ziling was sitting bored on a piece of bluestone, holding her cheeks and waiting. Seeing Chen Daoxian open his eyes, Ziling immediately stood up from the stone and said happily, "Your mana has recovered?" Chen Daoxian nodded. Hearing this, Ziling breathed a sigh of relief. Although half an hour was not long, it made her anxious. Because Chen Daoxian said before restoring his mana, the 4 Xianqing Dao Alliance Yuanying Zhenjuan, headed by Palace Lord Yuyue, did not give up on hunting him. Ziling and Chen Daoxian are staying in place now, and they may be overtaken by the other party at any time, so how can they not be afraid? A mere Jin Yuan Zhenjuan can force her to be humble for decades, not to mention the Yuyue Palace Lord, who is 10 times more terrifying than Jin Yuan Zhenjuan. Ziling suspected that, with the fiery temper of Palace Lord Yuyue, if Chen Daoxian was discovered again this time, he would definitely go all out and not give Chen Daoxian a chance to breathe again. Ziling couldn't figure out, how could Chen Daoxian sit here so calmly to recover his mana? Chen Daoxian didn't know what Ziling was thinking. If he knew, he would at most smile. Palace Lord Yuyue is indeed stronger than Chen Daoxian, but to say that he has no resistance at all is completely nonsense. Chen Daoxian's ability to forcibly take on the top true monarch, Palace Master Yuyue, is the proof. If Palace Lord Yuyue catches up to Chen Daoxian again, he will definitely not fight with the opponent this time, but choose to use teleportation to run away. Xingqian Kendo map opened the way, teleported to escape. In Chen Daoxian's view, unless it is pursued by a top true monarch who also masters the laws of space, or someone has set up a high-level formation siege in advance. Otherwise, he wants to escape, but it is just a very easy thing. The reason why Palace Lord Yuyue pursued him so persistently was that he did not see Chen Daoxian taking out the Star Sword Dao map in his Dantian, otherwise he would definitely extinguish his mind of chasing him. Because she knew that she would never be able to kill a top true monarch who ignored the suppression of Dao domain instruments and was proficient in the laws of space. But all this, Ziling is not clear. She only knew that Chen Daoxian was not the opponent of Palace Master Yuyue, and if he was caught up by the other party, his life and death would be unpredictable. If Chen Daoxian is killed, what else can she do to this little ant attached to the big tree Chen Daoxian? Let's go. Looking at Ziling, who was still stunned, Chen Daoxian grabbed her arm directly with his right hand. The next moment, the figures of the two gradually blurred. When the two of them showed their bodies again, they were already 2,300 miles away. Chen Daoxian's space teleportation, the farthest distance can only be teleported to within the range of his own consciousness. His current range of divine consciousness is only more than 2,300 miles, so the farthest distance of each teleportation is only that far. Compared with Mi Chen Fan's fleeting distance of 100,000 miles, Chen Daoxian's teleportation is still poor. Not a lot. However, compared with Mi Chen Fan, his teleportation has an advantage, that is, it can be used continuously. In the next second, the figures of him and Ziling were blurred again. It teleported a dozen times in a row. Chen Daoxian's position at this time has long deviated from the trajectory that Palace Lord Yuyue and others were looking for. Now, he has finally completely escaped the pursuit of Palace Master Yuyue. Brush. The figures of Chen Daoxian and Ziling appeared again. Chen Daoxian didn't react at all. Ziling, who was pulled by his wrist, bent over and kept retching. Looking at Ziling's embarrassed appearance, Chen Daoxian didn't say anything to blame. He knew in his heart that it was because Ziling's cultivation base and Dao realm were too low to adapt to the dizziness caused by space transmission. After retching for a while, Ziling finally got used to it. She looked at the surrounding scenery, looked up at Chen Daoxian, and asked, "Where are we, herd?" Chen Daoxian shook his head, "I don't know either." He paused for a while, then glanced at Ziling, and said in surprise, "Aren't you a local snake in the Jinyuan Xianqing sphere of influence? Don't you understand this place?" Hearing this, Ziling's pretty face showed a hint of bitterness. "I don't understand, in fact, it's the first time I've gone this far when I'm so old." This time, Chen Daoxian was completely shocked by Ziling's words. A dignified ninth-floor cultivator of the Purple Mansion, who has never traveled beyond the 100,000-mile radius of Jinyuan Xianqing. This is as ridiculous as a late Zifu monk in Sangzhou never leaving Guang'an. Seeing the doubts on Chen Daoxian's face, Ziling hesitated. "This is your private matter, and I won't force it if you don't want to say it." After all, Chen Daoxian expanded his consciousness and began to carefully investigate the situation here. Seeing Chen Daoxian's appearance, Ziling let go of her guard instead. She bit her lip and said, "It's okay to tell you, I was found out by my family since I was a child, and I was found out by my family as a special spiritual body like the Jiuyin Xuanzang body. In order to curry favor with Jinyuan Zhenjuan, the family treated me like a canary. Captive up. In order to save me, my parents were also secretly killed by Jinyuan Zhenjuan and his family. From childhood to adulthood, the farthest distance I left was the city wall of Jinyuan Xianqing." Saying that, Ziling gently unbuttoned her robe, revealing her white shoulders. I saw that there was an ugly blood-colored brand on her white shoulders, and this blood-colored brand was connected to her back. Original blood god forbidden. Seeing the red brand on her shoulder, Chen Daoxian frowned. Chen Jinren recognizes this ban. A blush flashed across Zilinkio's face. Chen Daoxian nodded. Origin blood god's ban is evil and abnormal, and it must be performed by intercepting the blood of the person's close relatives, and it must be banned by a high-level cultivator in person. The prohibition that Jinjuan Jinyuan has placed on you before, is this prohibition, right? Yes. Ziling got dressed and was in a low mood. Original blood divine forbidden is both a protection and a restriction. With the cultivation of Jinyuan Zhenjuan, as long as you are close to you, you can accurately sense your location. Hearing this, Ziling's face became even darker. Seeing that Ziling was silent, Chen Daoxian did not say anything to comfort him. The atmosphere between the two was a little dull. About half a cup of tea time. Chen Daoxian looked happy. "I found it, herd." Ziling raised her head and looked at him in surprise. Chen Daoxian said to himself, 1/5 order spiritual vein, 3 Jindan real people are entrenched, not bad, eh? Suddenly, he seemed to have discovered something interesting. It's actually him. What Chen Daoxian discovered on this 5th order spiritual vein was none other than the immortal Yin Jiu who escaped from Zenangguan Xianqing. That day, true monarch Ming Huang died in battle, and immortal Yingjiu immediately chose to hide his subordinates and run alone, and his actions were not much better than Yi Wudao at the beginning. It's just that immortal Yingjiu doesn't have Yi Wudao's background, and now he has long been on the wanted list of the Xianqing Dao League. Unexpectedly, immortal Yingjiu was hiding here with the 2 Jindan loose cultivators. Chen Daoxian is very strange. With the reward offered by the Xianqing Dao League, why didn't the 2 Jindan loose cultivators report each other to the Xianqing Dao League? You must know that harboring wanted criminals in the territory of the Xianqing Dao League is not a minor crime. In terms of dominance over the territory, the Xianqing Dao League is not much weaker than the Qianyuan Sword Sect. Even because the Xianqing Dao League has ruled the territory for a longer time, their rule over the jurisdiction is stronger and more deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. Southeast of Jinyuan Xianqing. In a 5th order spiritual vein. Above the spiritual veins, immortal palaces stand. This dojo, named Shuangsheng Peak, was named after 2 Jindan sages standing here. As a high-level cultivator next to true monarch Yuanying, Jindan cultivator can basically walk sideways within the sphere of influence of Jinyuan Xiancheng, as long as he does not offend Jinyuan true monarch and several other top powers. Especially the two golden elixir loose cultivators like Shuangshengfeng, who usually only have one or two golden elixir cultivators, are not willing to provoke them at all. After all, this kind of Jindan cultivator on Shuangsheng Peak belongs to the kind of person who can feed the whole family without hunger, and the Jindan cultivator in the Jindan family should not only consider themselves, but also the family behind them. Therefore, it is impossible to act as unscrupulously as the two on Shuangsheng Peak. Now, inside a splendid palace on the Shuangsheng Peak, a beautiful maid and dancing girl is dancing in front of the three Jindan cultivators. On the throne of the high platform, three Jindan real people are staggering and drinking happily. Brother Yin Vulture, brother, I really feel unworthy for you. Among the three, a Jindan cultivator wearing a golden Taoist robe with a long beard and a rough face said loudly, brother, you have worked hard for the Xianqing Taoist alliance for so many years, but only because you lost to the savage cultivators in Wanxinghai. If you attack, I will arrest you. Tsk tisk. Said, the rough-faced Jindan cultivator kept shaking his head. Hearing these words, Immortal Yinjia's face also darkened. Obviously, he did not expect that Zhongmen and Dao Meng would be so heartless and wanted to arrest him directly, leaving no room for him. In any case, his Yin Vulture real person is also a 9th-level cultivator of Jindan, and he is only one step away from the nascent soul stage. When he retreated back then, to a certain extent, he also reserved a strength for the Xianqing Dao League. Chapter 339. Seeing the unhappy face of Injiu, another tall and thin Jindan cultivator from Shuangsheng Peak said warmly, come on, don't say these depressing words, drink. Drink. Ha, look at my mouth, brother. The rough-faced Jindan cultivator patted his mouth, held up the glass of wine and said, brother Inji, this glass of wine will be regarded as my brother's apology for you. Say it. The rough-faced Jindan cultivator raised his head and drank the drink. Seeing the actions of the two, Yin Jiuzhen looked a lot better. He sighed, although Zhongmen and Dao Meng are unjust to me, I can't be disloyal to Zhongmen. I understand the intentions of the two, but taking advantage of the fire at this time is not a good idea. Hear this. The rough-faced Jindan cultivator suddenly became anxious. Brother Inji, you can't say that. The rough monk put down the wine glass in his hand. Jinyuan Xiancheng is one of the logistics ferry cities of the Xianqing Dao League, and every year, a large amount of resources are transported to the major ferry cities on the front line. Especially this time, Brother Injiu must also be able to see that the war between Qianyuan Jianzong and Xianqing Dao League may not be good. We only need to eat this batch of resources shipped to the front. The resources for Yingying may be available. Brother Inji, think about it carefully, now that you are wanted by the Xianqing Dao League, even if they can't catch you, where can you get the resources to break through the nascent soul in the future? The rough cultivator had a grim expression on his face, and waved his hand fiercely. It's better to take advantage of now to make a big fortune. Afterwards, let's leave the territory of the Xianqing Dao Alliance and go to the Qianji Hall or the Tianyanzong's territory. With our cultivation base, as long as we break through to the nascent soul stage, and then form a party of loose cultivators, even Qianji Temple and Tianyanzong will not dare to underestimate us. Wouldn't it be fun? Hearing this, Immortal Injiu was heartbroken. Indeed, now that he is wanted by the Xianqing Dao League, he does have to plan for the future. The two people in front of Shuangsheng Peak can say that their cultivation base has not reached the 9th floor of Jindan after all, but he is different. His current cultivation base has reached the 9th floor of Jindan, and his breakthrough to nascent soul is imminent. Originally, with his credit for capturing Zhenangwen, coupled with the support of true monarch Ming Huang, it is very likely that he will be cultivated by the sect and break through the resources of the nascent soul period, so Injiu Zhenren doesn't need to worry about it. But now, he not only lost Zenangwan, but also abandoned the city and fled at a critical moment, and was wanted by the Xianqingdao League. His identity has also changed from the high-ranking Jindan Jinren of the Qingwei Taoist faction to a wanted criminal of the Xianqing Taoist League. The most direct impact of the change of identity is the acquisition of resources. For any monk, cultivation requires a lot of resources, and the more advanced monks are, the more resources are required for cultivation. In the past, as a disciple of the Qingwei Dao school, Immortal Injiu never had any worries about resources. But now, after he was reduced to a loose cultivator, he deeply felt that cultivation was not easy. If it wasn't for these two people from Shuangsheng Peak, he wouldn't even have a place to stand. Of course, Master Injiu also knew in his heart that the two people from Shuangsheng Peak did not take him out of kindness, but because they saw that it was profitable for him. For the two Jindan cultivators in Shuangshengfeng, the greatest benefit of Inji Jinren is that he knows the resource route of Jinyuan Xianqing to various immortal cities on the front line, as well as the strength of the monks responsible for escorting. In the realm of the Xianqingdao League, if you want to rob the materials transported by the Xianqingdao League, you must have a foolproof strategy. Otherwise, it is not a robbery, but a gift. This simple truth, the two Jindan cultivators of Shuangshengfeng naturally understand, and since they want to rob, they must rob valuable resources. The two Jindan cultivators from Shuangsheng Peak did not know which of the resources that Jinyuan Xianqing transported to the major immortal cities on the front line was the most valuable and which was the least valuable. If they rob a group of resources used by low-level monks, wouldn't they lose a lot? Because things like robbing resources can never be done for a long time. Before the Xianqingdao Alliance can react, they must run away with one vote and escape from the Xianqingdao Alliance's realm. The reason why these two Jindan real people are willing to give up the foundation here is to loot a batch of resources and run away. It is completely seen that the Qianyuan sword sect is not doing well this time. As far as they know, the Xianqingdao League and the Qianyuan sword sect started the war in less than 2 months, and they had already lost 7 immortal cities and killed 11 Yuanying true monarchs. One can imagine how tragic the battle on the front line was. Although their Jinyuan immortal city was at the back, compared with the positions of Xianyang sect and Light Daoist sect, their Shuangsheng Peak also belonged to the front line. Once Qianyuan Jianzong tore through the frontline defense and drove straight in, their Shuangsheng Peak would bear the brunt. As loose cultivators, they have no plans to sacrifice their lives for the Xianqingdao League. The foundation of Shuangshengfeng seems to be good for the time being, but it is hard to say in the future, and the two of them have to make plans early. Actually, within the scope of Jinyuan Xianqing, the forces floating in people's hearts are definitely not the only two sacred peaks. Like those long-standing immortal clans, they all secretly communicated with the Qianyuan Jianzong, for fear that the Qianyuan Jianzong would take the Chuyuan kingdom in the future, and they would extend a slaughtering knife to them. In comparison, the two of them just planned to grab a batch of resources and ran away, which was conscientious enough. Half an hour. The hesitant look on the face of Injiu Jinren gradually became firmer. Okay, I promise you. After this vote, the 3 of us will leave the territory of the Xianqingdao Alliance together. From then on, I will have nothing to do with Zongmen. After saying these words, Yin Juzhen's expression was complicated. After all, the Qingwei Dao school was also the sect that he had practiced for many years from childhood to adulthood. Just leaving like this, it is impossible to say that there is no reluctance in his heart, but for the sake of his own path, Master Injiu still knows how to choose. Heard. The two Jindan real people looked at each other, and a look of surprise flashed in their eyes. Brother Yin Vulture, The two didn't finish speaking. Ahead, 2 escaping lights flew directly into the hall and stood in the center of the hall. What? Seeing the sudden appearance of these 2 figures, the beautiful maids who were dancing exclaimed one after another, and the scene was a little chaotic for a while. See. Chen Daoxian frowned slightly. Certainly. He snorted softly. The next second, the maidservants who were exclaiming, seemed to have pressed the pause button one by one and remained motionless. Divine light. With Qin Daoxuan's current sea of divine light, and if he exerts his soul-fixing divine light, even Jin Dan Jinren can easily settle down, let alone the group of low-level female cultivators who dance. This group of female cultivators was originally a group of cauldrons and concubines. Chen Daoxian personally shot them, no doubt it was a cannon to hit mosquitoes. Seeing that two monks, a man and a woman, suddenly broke into their own fairy palace, the two Jindan monks from Shuangsheng Peak stood up and asked, "Who are you and why did you trespass on my brother's dojo?" Who knows, Chen Daoxian didn't seem to hear what the two of them were saying, and his eyes skipped the two of them, and directly cast them on Yingji Jinren. Chen Chen. The moment Yingjiu real person saw Chen Daoxian, he only felt a cold air rushing directly to the top of his head, and his whole body trembled involuntarily. He had seen Chen Daoxuan's strength, and he had escaped from death once in the opponent's hands. But this time, Yingji Jinren felt that he might not have such good luck. After all, there was no second Minghuang Jinjuan here to save him. Seeing that Chen Daoxian ignored them, the two Jindan cultivators of Shuangsheng Peak felt that there was an evil fire in their hearts for a while. But Chen Daoxian is a Jindan cultivator after all. Without a conflict of interest, the two of them do not want to rush into conflict. Especially at a critical time when they are preparing for big things. But when the rough-faced Jindan cultivator saw Xiling beside Chen Daoxian, his breathing suddenly became rapid. He quickly transmitted a voice to his tall and thin companion and said, "Senior brother, look at this woman." Hearing this, the tall and thin cultivator stared intently, his complexion suddenly changed, he looked at the rough cultivator, and said, "The body of Zhouyin Xuanzang." The two looked at each other, and the color of greed suddenly accumulated in their eyes. If the ordinary cauldron is only comparable to the spiritual pill, then the female cultivator with the body of Zhouyin profound concubine can become the cauldron, and the Jindan cultivator can even break through to the nascent soul stage, which shows the preciousness of this kind of spiritual body. True monarch Jin Yuan abolished so much to imprison Xiling. Naturally, it was not just because of Xiling's beauty. For Jinjuan Jin Yuan, what kind of beauty he has never seen before, how could he put so much effort into a mere woman, only to improve his cultivation and increase his lifespan are his real pursuits. Although the two of Shuangsheng Peak's cultivation base is not as good as Jinyuan Jinjuan, but their mentality is almost the same as each other. Cultivation and strength are the most important things for monks. Think of this. The two looked at each other, and after making up their minds, they suddenly burst out. "Do not want." On the side, Yingjiu Jinren was shocked when he saw that the two directly shot at Chen Daoxian. The two of them didn't know Chen Daoxian, but Yingji Jinren could. It's a pity that the reminder of Yingji Jinren was still too late, and I saw two sword lights, which directly penetrated the bodies of the two Jindan cultivators at an unbelievable speed. The two of them lowered their heads in a daze, and glanced at the big gap in their dantian. Immediately afterwards, their bodies completely collapsed and dissipated, turning into nothingness. Using the power of the law to attack the flesh body that can't even reach the realm of blood is no different from smashing porcelain with a hammer. Broken when touched. Immortal Yingjiu saw that the two monks of the same rank who had just been drinking and bragging with him were instantly annihilated, his knees softened, and he knelt down in front of Chen Daoxian with a thud. "Senior, spare your life." Saying that, he directly kowtowed to Chen Daoxian. The Qingwei Taoist sect is located. Above the Taiyi Immortal Pond, a dozen figures were hidden by the hazy mist, which was vaguely invisible. These dozen or so are all the Yuanying true monarchs of the Qingwei Taoist sect. Sudden. The feminine man in the center opened his eyes, and he glanced at the center of Taiyi Immortal Pond, the dazzling brilliance, and a hint of pain flashed in his eyes. Just now, news came back from the front line that Qianyuan Jianzong has won 2 immortal cities. In less than 2 months, my Xianqing Dao League has lost 9 immortal cities in a row, and most of the immortal cities in the front line have been lost. Saying that, the feminine man closed his eyes. Metropolitan. Even though he could see that the sect master looked unhappy, Elder Yun, who was beside him, still opened his mouth to report, just now, Jinyuan Immortal City was destroyed. Hearing this, the feminine man suddenly opened his eyes and stared at Elder Yun. Jinyuan Xiancheng has 2 true monarchs led by Yuyue personally, plus Jinyuan true monarch. There are 4 nascent soul true monarchs, of which Yuyue is the top true monarch, who can destroy Jinyuan Xiancheng. Suddenly, the feminine man seemed to remember something. Yuyue is fine, right? Palace Lord Yuyue is fine, it's just. Elder Yun paused. The person who destroyed Jinyuan Xiancheng was the Jindan cultivator who killed true monarch Minghuang before, Qin Daoxian. Qin Daoxian. The feminine man muttered. This is the second time he has heard of this taboo. A mere Jindan cultivator can actually achieve this step. Although he didn't want to believe it, he knew that with Yu Yu's temperament, he would never lie. On the side, Elder Yun continued, Palace Lord Yuyue also said that Qin Daoxian must be killed, no matter how much he pays. It really should be killed. The femininity of this Qingwei Taoist sect master was threatening. He, who had always been calm in front of his subordinates, was also angered by Qin Daoxuan's repeated provocations. You must know that the Jinyuan Immortal City is less than 1,000,000 miles away from the Qingwei Taoist faction, and it is by no means comparable to those immortal cities on the front line. Qin Daoxuan's move is simply slapping the face of Xianqing Daomeng with a slap. Not only his Qingwei Dao faction, but also Xianyang sect will definitely respond. Think about it. The feminine man's face returned to calm. Since Qianyuan Jianzong doesn't obey the rules and sent people to my hinterland to make trouble, we don't have to be polite to it. As he said that, he looked at a true monarch yuanying among the crowd, Elder He. Subordinates are here. The elder surnamed He bowed his hands in a salute. Last time I asked you to add some trouble to Qianyuan Jianzong, do you have any eyebrows? This. The elder surnamed He had an ugly face. Qianyuan Jianzong has been victorious, and the momentum is like a rainbow. All of our dark sons who rebelled in Qianyuan Jianzong did not dare to act rashly. These wallflowers. A hint of resentment flashed in the feminine man's eyes. In the future, this seat will break through the sea of 1,000,000 stars, and we must clear these grasses, heard. The elder surnamed He lowered his head and did not dare to answer. I remember correctly, so Qin Daoxian is a Zhangzhou cultivator, right? It's the Zhangzhou cultivator. The sect master of the Qingwei Taoist sect nodded. Find a way to make the Jiang family move. However, with the character of the old fox of the Jiang family, he may not dare to take this risk. Hearing this, sect master Yinru looked at Elder He and said with a mysterious smile, isn't his Jiang family short of money? This, subordinates will do it. Say it. The elder surnamed He disappeared instantly. Obviously, this is also a true monarch nascent soul who has comprehended the laws of space. Shuangxing Peak Asgard. Qin Daoxian looked at the realine vulture who was kowtowing like garlic in front of him, and was quite speechless. He couldn't figure it out. The other party was also a late Jindan cultivator. How could he have no bottom line to this extent? Think of this. Qin Daoxian said indifferently, get up. Ah. Hearing this, the real Injio stood up tremblingly. Qin Daoxian looked at the quail-like real person in front of him, and asked with great interest, when the Jinan Pass was broken, I asked your subordinates, before you received the news of the defeat of Minghuang Jinjuan, ran away early. So, how do you judge that true monarch Minghuang will definitely lose to me? Hearing this, Yin Jiu's eyes flickered uncertainly. Chapter 340. Yinji Zhenren took a deep breath and cupped his hands. If the junior tells the senior this secret, it may be a way of life. After speaking, he raised his head and stared at Qin Daoxian intently. Qin Daoxian looked at him without changing his face, and said indifferently, do you think you are qualified to negotiate with me now? Hearing this, Yin Jiu's brows and hearts beat wildly. He stared at Qin Daoxian and wanted to shoot several times, but his mind gave a mad warning, telling him that doing so would only lead to death. Finally, Immortal Yin Ji lowered his hands weakly, bowed his head and said, "I said." A smile appeared on the corner of Qin Daoxian's mouth. After half a cup of tea, Qin Daoxian played with a broken white jade talisman and frowned. "You mean, you can escape early in Zenangwan because of this jade talisman?" "Exactly." Immortal Yin Vulture nodded. "It's just that this jade talisman seems to be seriously damaged. Sometimes it doesn't work, but as long as it gives me an early warning, it will definitely be a matter of my life and death. I have practiced so far and have relied on it several times to escape mortal situations." "Oh." When Qin Daoxian heard this, he played with this jade talisman with great interest. According to Immortal Injio, this jade talisman is an enhanced version of spiritual warning, which can predict danger in advance and seek blessings and avoid disasters. The only downside is that this thing seems to be badly damaged and doesn't work in all cases. Just like this time. The real Yin Jiao was drinking and having fun here, and this jade talisman did not predict the danger in advance. This is obviously what the real Yin Vulture said, the situation that does not work. Handing over the jade talisman, Immortal Injio looked at Qin Daoxian anxiously. Seeing Immortal Yinjia's expression, Qin Daoxian turned his palms and put the jade talisman into the storage ring. "The vulture. The junior is here." Immortal Yin Vulture hurriedly bowed. "It stands to reason that the ransom you gave is enough to redeem yourself, but unfortunately." Qin Daoxian shook his head. "You have a feud with my Qin family, I have to kill you." Hearing this, the real person Inji suddenly changed color. "Senior, this junior has never had a grudge against your Qin family, I hope the senior can see clearly." Ming Jian. Saying that, Immortal Yin Eagle knelt down again. Only this time, Qin Daoxian was indifferent. "Back then, when you led the army to break through the Jinan Pass, more than a dozen elders of the immortal generation of my Qin family died at the hands of the army you led. Tell me, do you have any grudges with my Qin family?" This. Immortal Yinjia's thoughts turned sharply. "I led the army to attack Zenangwan, under the order of the Tao League, not my willingness to do so, no wonder I." Qin Daoxian nodded. "You attacked Zenangwan at the order of the Tao League, and I killed you to avenge the ancestors of the family. You and I are both right. Say it." A dazzling sword light drowned the real Yin Vulture. The power of space law in the high section of the law realm broke out, and the fleshy body of the real Injio real blood-dripping realm was dissolved in an instant, leaving only a head that rolled to the ground. Before dying, Yin Juzhen's eyes widened, as if wondering, since both are right, who is at fault? Unfortunately, this answer, he is destined to never know. Aside. Ziling stared blankly at the scene in front of her, stunned. She and Qin Daoxian entered the door, and now, with less than a cup of tea, the three Jindan real people were beheaded by Qin Daoxian like chopping melons and vegetables. Ziling couldn't help but wonder, is this really a cultivator in the early stage of Jindan? As expected of an existence that can kill the late nascent soul. After beheading three Jindan real people in a row, Qin Daoxian turned his head and looked at Ziling. "This place has a fifth-order spiritual vein, which is a good place to cultivate. During this time, you and I will live here temporarily." Hearing this, Ziling pursed her lips and kept rubbing the corners of her clothes with her little hands. "What's up?" Ziling summoned up her courage. "Why did you take me in before you told me?" In fact, Ziling had a faint guess in her heart. Qin Daoxian took her in for the same purpose as Jinjuan Jin Yuan, and wanted to use her as a cauldron to improve her cultivation. Compared with the panacea, using a female cultivator with the body of Zhouyin Xianzhang as a cauldron, the effect is not known how many times better. To a certain extent, the help of Zhouyin Zuanzhang's body to the cultivation of monks seems to be better than the vitality essence that Qin Daoxian had used before. Although the essence of vitality can quickly improve the cultivation base, it has a defect, that is, after the cultivation base of the cultivator reaches the purple palace period, it is difficult for it to continue to improve the cultivation base of the cultivator. Because after the monks reach the Zifu period, their avenues are often lower than their own cultivation. If the realm of the Tao is insufficient, it is difficult for the essence of vitality to continue to forcibly improve the cultivation. The cauldron of the 9 profound concubine body does not have this concern. Using it as a cauldron can not only quickly improve the cultivation base, but to a certain extent, it can even improve the realm of the great Tao. Although the way it improves the realm of the Tao is not directly like the star kendo map, it is similar to drinking Tao enlightenment tea, which can make the monk enter the state of enlightenment, thereby improving the monk's Tao state. Even so, the cauldron of Jiuyin Zhuanzhang's body is much more precious than the essence of vitality. Not to mention Jindan cultivator, it is a treasure for Yuanyingzhenjuan. This is also the reason why Ziling did not dare to leave alone. Because she knew that with her special physique, once she left Qin Daoxuan's shelter, she would only meet the next Jin Yuanzhenjuan again. Ding furnace. These 2 words deeply hurt Ziling. Ziling's eyes towards Qin Daoxian gradually changed from nervousness to despair. Since she couldn't resist Jinjuan Jin Yuan, she naturally couldn't resist the stronger Qin Daoxian. Qin Daoxian didn't know what Ziling was thinking. He thought about it and said, "I do have something to ask Fairy for, heard." Zilinkio's face was full of desolation, and tears streamed across her white and tender face. She raised her head like a rain of pear blossoms. "I knew that all of you are the same, all of you are attracted to the 9 mysterious body of a concubine. Forget it, since you took me out of the Qian immortal mansion and avenged your concubine, you can do whatever you want next." Saying that, Ziling quietly closed her eyes, but her eyelashes kept shaking. Ah! Seeing Ziling so excited, Qin Daoxian was quite speechless. "I just want to ask the fairy, can you teach me the secret method of hiding consciousness and body shape before?" "What?" Hearing this, Fairy Ziling widened her eyes, and then her pretty face turned red, and her whole body looked like a red peach. Why didn't you tell me earlier?" After saying that, he turned his head and fled towards the palace as if he flew away. It wasn't until he flew out of Asgard that Qin Daoxian heard a word. Then, the next moment, a jade slip flew towards Qin Daoxian. Qin Daoxian was also quite embarrassed when he took over the jade slip. It was the first time that he was so naked as a disciple. The next day, Twin Peaks. Inside a cave. Qin Daoxian sat in the quiet room, looking at the jade talisman that he got from the hands of Injiuzhenren. As Injiuzhenren said, this jade talisman was severely damaged. "Watch carefully." Qin Daoxian found that there was a crack in the center of the jade talisman that divided it into 2 halves. It seemed that he could break the jade talisman apart with a single effort. After playing for a while, Qin Daoxian, who had nothing to gain, put it in the storage ring. Although I don't know the name of this jade talisman or its refining method, Qin Daoxian still has a way to repair it. That is to use a lot of good fortune to repair. As the most magical energy in this world, the power of creation can not only promote magic tools, but also repair damaged magic tools. Many nascent soul true monarchs will choose to use the power of creation to repair their instruments after they are seriously damaged. This is also the reason why the power of creation can become a hard currency in the hands of high-level monks. Just, why didn't the real vulture fix it? Qin Daoxian frowned. Can't it be repaired? As a third-order high-grade item refiner, Qin Daoxian could not see the grade of this jade talisman at all. But obviously, this jade talisman is not a magic talisman, but a magic weapon. Because there is a unique spell pattern on the talisman, it is very different from the magic weapon, and it can be distinguished at a glance. After the magic weapon is melted into the array, there is no difference in the appearance. Only by relying on the aura of the magic weapon or activating the magic weapon to make the magic weapon show the pattern, can the rank of the magic weapon be judged. But Qin Daoxian instilled mana into this jade talisman, and the jade talisman did not move at all. After fiddling with it, Chen Daoxian, who had nothing to gain, could only put away the jade talisman. Putting away the jade talisman, Chen Daoxian took out the second item. A jade slip obtained from Xiling. Divine consciousness was immersed in the jade slip, and Chen Daoxian quickly read the secret method of restraining breath and consciousness. This secret technique, called it, is a technique with a rank as high as the 4th rank. According to the description of this technique, Xiling has only just started his cultivation, otherwise she would never have been discovered by him when she secretly peeped at Chen Daoxian. You must know that although Chen Daoxian's consciousness is not as good as that of true monarch nascent soul, he is a lot stronger than Jindan cultivators of the same rank. Even so, Fairy Xiling on the 9th floor of the Zifu was able to hide from Chen Daoxian's consciousness, which shows how powerful this secret method of concealing consciousness and breath is. The breath-holding technique Chen Daoxian originally practiced was obtained from a female prisoner in Guang'an Mansion when he was cultivating qi. For so many years, he has been in the hinterland of Wangxinghai, but he has never thought about changing another breath-holding technique. In normal times, the effect of the breath-holding technique is really not great. As the young patriarch of the Chen family, he holds the largest family power in Sangzhou, but he is not a loose cultivator who shrinks his head and shrinks his head. Why is he practicing the breathing technique? Chen Daoxian practiced the breath-holding technique back then because his family and his own strength were relatively weak, and he had too many secrets in his hands, so he had to keep a low profile. But as the Chen family grew step by step, his strength increased step by step, and things like restraining his breath were also getting farther and farther away from Chen Daoxian. The real powerhouse, how can one shrink his head and shrink his head? Think of this. Chen Daoxian shook his head. I didn't expect that I would have to study another secret method to restrain the breath from my practice today. He was joking, but he knew in his heart that at this time he was in the hinterland of the Xianqing Dao League, and the situation was extremely dangerous. Especially after the Battle of Jinyuan Xiancheng, his threat to the Xianqing Dao League will definitely rise to a new level. An existence with strength close to the top true monarch, lurking in the hinterland of Xianqing Dao League, or during the war between Xianqing Dao League and Qianyuan Jianzong. I wonder which force can endure it. Chen Daoxian can be sure that the Xianqing Dao League will frantically hunt him down next. The next time he makes another move, what he encounters might not be a top true monarch, but a combination of several top true monarchs. A palace lord of Yuyue, Chen Daoxian almost fell into the opponent's hands. Several top true monarchs, especially the top true monarchs who are good at the laws of space, might really want to capsize in the gutter. Therefore, Chen Daoxian must use all means to strengthen his survivability. If you want to strengthen your survivability, strengthening your own strength is definitely the best way. For Chen Daoxian. Right now, there are two quickest ways to strengthen one's strength. One is to improve one's cultivation, and the other is to improve the realm of the Great Tao. It is difficult to improve your cultivation in a short period of time. Although Chen Daoxian's Tao realm is far ahead of his own cultivation, it has only been less than a year for him to break through the golden core stage. It is already very good to be able to stabilize the cultivation base in such a short period of time. Unless you get treasures like the essence of vitality again, you don't need to work hard to refine the aura, you can directly improve your cultivation. Otherwise, Chen Daoxian wanted to upgrade his cultivation from the golden core stage to the nascent soul stage, which would take at least 100 years. In addition to the cultivation of qi, the cultivation of the body is also the same. Chen Daoxian has no shortage of body refining treasures in his hands. Whether it is blood crystals, blood marrow, or even indestructible true meaning, he has a lot of inventory in his hands. But at the same time, the improvement of body training is also an extremely time-consuming thing. Chen Daoxian's body refinement has only reached the early stage of skull smashing, and it can be said that it is the bottom of all Jindan cultivators. This is also the reason why Chen Daoxian never fights with the other party in close combat. Compared with his Tao realm, his body is fragile like a porcelain doll. Under the absolute physical disparity, no matter how strong his melee skills are, it is useless. It is not advisable to improve the cultivation base. There is only the second method, to improve the realm of the Tao. This method can quickly enhance Chen Daoxuan's strength. Before the trip to Jinyuan Xiancheng, his space law was only in the middle part of the law realm, and then he obtained the treasure of Jinyuan Zhenjuan, and his space law was promoted to the high part of the law realm. After merging with the law of water movement, the power skyrocketed. As a result, his strength is close to that of the top true monarch, which is stronger than when he fought against the true monarch Minghuang. If he can promote the law of water movement to the high level of the law, then the fusion of the two laws of air and water will reach 50%. Then his strength, even among the top true monarchs, is considered to be at the forefront. However, in order to achieve this step, in addition to consuming the power of good fortune, Chen Daoxian also has to improve the fusion of laws. Both laws have reached the high level of the law realm, and the degree of fusion of the laws will inevitably decrease. The higher the realm of the law, the greater the repulsion. The high level of the law realm and the first stage of the law realm can have a 50% degree of fusion, and the two laws of the high level of the law realm must not have a 50% degree of fusion. If he wants to achieve another 50% fusion degree, Chen Daoxian has to work the way of formation. Because the fusion of his laws was forcibly fused by the power of the formation and the thoughts on the two swords. This is completely different from other top true monarchs. The advantage of Chen Daoxian doing this is that he can quickly improve his own strength, but the disadvantage is that he doesn't know why. Forced integration is ignorant after all, and the rules encountered later are more repulsive. But the advantage is that he does not need to struggle to understand the mystery of the fusion of laws, and he can directly fuse the two laws. It's like doing a question. The fusion rules of other top true monarchs are thinking and solving problems step by step, while Chen Daoxian directly copied the answers. Although the answer is the same for both. But other top true monarchs know this and why, and although Chen Daoxian uses the power of the formation to force the fusion of the law, he does not know the mystery of the fusion of the law. The further the rules are merged, the more difficult it will be. Chen Daoxuan's method, in the later stage, will encounter more and more resistance. But in the early stage, his method of integrating the law is undoubtedly much faster than other top true monarchs who rely on their own self-cultivation. 7017K. Chapter 341. Without the power of creation, it is difficult to improve the realm of the Great Tao in a short period of time. In this dangerous situation, the only way is to enhance the ability to hide oneself. Chen Daoxian secretly said, he raised his head, especially when he sneaked into the Qingwei Dao faction. Since Chen Daoxian learned that the Qingwei Taoist sect owns the Tai Shin Shui, he has basically determined what the one-year agreement of the Zhenhai Palace Hall Master means. If he guessed correctly, the Hall Master of Zhenhai Palace will definitely raid the Qingwei Taoist sect in 10 months. Its purpose is Tai Shin Shui. From the perspective of Qianyuan Jianzong, even if they can't grab the Tai Shin Shui of the Qingwei Taoist sect, they must destroy it as much as possible, and never let the Qingwei Taoist sect get it. It is difficult for Chen Daoxian to imagine how difficult it is to destroy the enemy's treasure in the enemy's lair. But for Chen Xianhe, he had to give it a try. Chen Daoxian knew in his heart that if he missed this opportunity, Chen Xianhe would no longer have a trace of life. That's right. He has already decided to help the master of Zhenhai Palace. Qianyuan Jianzong launched a general attack on the Xianqing Taoist League. The purpose was to attract the attention of the Xianqing Taoist League, forcing the Xianqing Taoist League, especially the Qingwei Taoist faction, to divide troops to protect their respective territories. As a result, the pressure of the Zhenhai Hall's Hall Master to raid the Qingwei Taoist faction will definitely be much less. But no matter how little the pressure, the Zhenhai Palace Hall Master is still facing the entire sect of the Qingwei Taoist sect. Others of the Qingwei Taoist sect will not talk about it. The sect master of the Qingwei Taoist sect must sit in the sect. You must know that the suzerain of the Qingwei Taoism is known as the first powerhouse of the Xianqing Taoist League. Its strength is definitely stronger than that of the Zhenhai Palace Hall Master who has not broken through the world. Not counting other true monarchs, just this one, the Zhenhai Palace Hall Master is enough to face. Not to mention that there must be at least a dozen true monarchs guarding the sect by the side of the Qingwei Taoist sect master, plus the Qingwei Taoist sect guarding the sect. What Qin Daoxian thinks, the Zhenhai Palace Hall Master raided the Qingwei Taoist sect alone, and it was all an act of courting death. Of course. Since Qianyuan Jianzong dared to let Zhenhai Hall's Hall Master raid the enemy's nest, he would definitely not be unprepared at all. It's just that Qin Daoxian couldn't figure out what kind of preparations actually made Qianyuan Jianzong have such confidence. Deciding to accompany the Hall Master of Zhenhai Hall to raid the Qingwei Taoist sect is probably the most risky decision Qin Daoxian has made since he embarked on the road of cultivation. But there are some things that Qin Daoxian must do. Otherwise, he will regret for life. Awakening of cicadas and cicadas. Qin Daoxian looked up the contents of this breath-holding technique in the jade slip, and the expression on his face became more and more serious. According to the description in this technique, once you get started with this technique, after you perform it, the cultivator of the golden elixir will not be able to find any flaws in the breath. Even if Jin Dan cultivator stood in front of Qin Daoxian and used his spiritual sense to probe him, he would only feel that he was scanning a cloud of air. If used in conjunction with stealth, it is definitely the only way to sneak into the enemy's lair and destroy it. You can have such a strong effect at the beginning, and it is not difficult for even the top true monarchs to discover after consummation. Qin Daoxian continued to read. Sure enough, according to the description of this method, if true monarch Yuanying's divine consciousness does not reach the level of more than 50,000 li, it is impossible to find the monks who performed the shocking breathing technique in the perfect state. The awakening and cicada breathing technique of the perfect state, combined with the invisibility technique, I will sneak into the Qingwei Taoism in the future, I must have a much greater grasp. Qin Daoxian muttered. Compared with the breath-holding technique he obtained from the foundation-building female prisoner during the qi refining period, this fourth-order, awakening insect breathing technique is undoubtedly much more profound. Even an ordinary Jindan cultivator would have to spend a lot of energy to get started. It has to be said that Ziling, as a 9th-level cultivator of the Purple Mansion, was able to start practicing this fourth-order technique, which was an extraordinary talent. But no matter how extraordinary her talent is, compared with Qin Daoxian, the gap is still too big. In particular, Qin Daoxian has now reached the 3rd level of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic. He can almost freely adjust the multiplier of his comprehension, and he can practice techniques and sword tactics with ease. Even as long as his comprehension stars are enough, comprehending the law of the Tao may not be slower than the power of creation to directly improve the law of the Tao. Moreover, compared to the power of creation, the star of understanding has another advantage of directly improving the realm of the law of the Tao, that is, the power of creation cannot help the master of the star kendo map to integrate the law of the avenue. And the savvy stars can. It is difficult to improve the realm of the Tao law, and it is even more difficult to integrate the Tao law with each other. But the path of cultivation is like this. The further you go, the more difficult it becomes beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Otherwise, these real Yuanying Zenjins and Yuanshan Daijins in this world have thousands of years of lifespan, but no one can survive the calamity and become immortals. Why? The biggest reason is that the road of practice becomes more bumpy and rugged as you go forward. Quiet indoors. Qin Daoxian sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. In the sea of consciousness, the comprehension stars slowly turned, and his comprehension began to soar gradually. 10 times, 20 times, 30 times until 100 times. His comprehension broke through 100 times, and Qin Daoxian was shocked, as if he had broken a certain limit of his own. The originally obscure awakening of cicadas and cicadas seemed as simple as 1 + 1 in his eyes. Less than 3 breaths. Amazing insects and cicadas breathing technique has already started. 10 breaths, Xiaocheng of amazing insects and cicadas breathing technique. Half a cup of tea, awakening the cicada breathing technique, completed. With a stick of incense, the awakening of cicadas and cicadas was completed. An unfamiliar fourth-order technique, from the beginning of cultivation to completion, took a total of 1 stick of incense. The only price is that the comprehension stars in his sea of knowledge have become smaller. Open your eyes. Chen Daoxian performed the awakening of cicadas and cicadas, and in an instant, his breath became misty like a cloud of smoke, and then, the breath of his whole body disappeared completely. Chen Daoxian probed out his consciousness and scanned everything in Shuangsheng Peak, but no one found it. Now the highest cultivation base in Shuangsheng Peak is Xiling on the 9th floor of Zifu. It is useless to detect the concealment of consciousness. Chen Daoxian thought for a while, withdrew his consciousness, and performed the invisibility technique again. This time, his figure and breath completely disappeared. According to the statement in the Awakening of Cicadas and Cicadas, at this moment, a top true monarch is standing in front of him. If the other party does not practice high-level spiritual secret art and actively uses it, he will not be able to find him. This retreat time is the shortest time since Chen Daoxian practiced. Less than half an hour in total. It wasn't as long as the time he spent cultivating every day during the qi refining period. Being in the hinterland of the Xianqing Dao League, Chen Daoxian naturally had no intention to practice at ease. He has not forgotten the purpose of his trip, which is to create chaos for the Xianqing Dao League, and by the way, it will be better if he can rob the power of creation and improve his own Dao state. Now, his space law has reached the high level of the law realm. If the Dao realm does not break through to the world realm, it is impossible for the space law to improve. Now, the only thing that Chen Daoxian can improve is the law of water movement in the first stage of the law, and the degree of fusion of the 2 laws of air and water. Of course, it is also possible to comprehend a new law. But this difficulty is obviously greater than improving the law of water movement and the integration of the 2 laws of air and water. To improve the law of water movement, you need to consume the power of creation. To improve the 2 laws of air and water, in addition to relying on comprehension to slowly comprehend, he can only take shortcuts, improve his formation state, and use the power of the formation and his mind to forcibly merge the 2 laws. At present, Chen Daoxian has taken this shortcut quite well. The degree of fusion of the 2 laws of air and water can reach 50%. From the perspective of the Dao law, Chen Daoxian is no different from an ordinary top-notch true monarch. The only shortcoming is that his cultivation is far worse than the top true monarch. Even if he relies on the Star Sword Dao map, he is still not the opponent of Palace Master Yue. With my understanding of the stars in the sea, it may be difficult to improve the fusion of the 2 laws of air and water. Chen Daoxian frowned. The best way now is to continue robbing the Xianqing Dao League. The power of creation. The Jiuanzi Xianqing Dao League should not have them, and even if they did, the number would be very small. Only the hard currency of high-level monks like the power of creation, the Xianqing Dao League should have a lot of reserves. The 3 bottles of the power of creation he obtained by robbing the treasure of Jinyuan Zhenjuan were a typical example. Although the trip to Jinyuan Xiancheng, Chen Daoxian did not kill Jinyuan Zhenjuan as planned. But he took the other party's treasure, and destroyed Jinyuan Xiancheng, which caused a lot of trouble for the logistics supply of Xianqing Dao League's frontline Xiancheng, not without gain. It is precisely because he obtained 300 drops of the power of creation from true monarch Jinyuan that his space law can be promoted from the middle part of the law realm to the high part of the law realm. Now, his water movement law still needs his promotion. At this moment, Chen Daoxian not only has the awakening insect breathing technique and invisibility technique by his side, but also has a special warning jade talisman obtained from the Realine vulture. The hinterland of the Xianqing Dao League is dangerous to other Wanxinghai cultivators, but for Chen Daoxian, it is still a treasure. After all, with his current strength, as long as he is not targeted by the top nascent soul true monarch who is proficient in the laws of space, there are basically few people who can keep him. And in the entire Xianqing Dao League, how many top true monarchs are there? The front line of Xianqing Dao League is still fighting against Qianyuan Jianzong. How many people can they tell to hunt down Chen Daoxian? Think of this. Chen Daoxian suddenly came to the spirit. He took out a jade slip from True Monarch Yin Vulture's storage ring. According to his inspection, what was recorded in this jade slip was the logistics transportation route of the Xianqing Dao League. Moreover, these transportation routes must pass through Jinyuan Xiancheng. Although Jinyuan Xiancheng is now destroyed, the transportation line on the front line will not stop because the war between the two sides is raging. From the route map recorded on the jade slip, Chen Daoxian judged that there are about 3 routes, which are the routes for the Xianqing Dao League to transport precious materials. Ordinary resources, Chen Daoxian is not very interested. Even if he looted, it would not hurt for the rich and powerful Xianqing Dao League. But precious resources are different. The precious resources here refer to the resources that are useful to cultivators above the Zifu period. Seeing this, Chen Daoxian had a plan in his heart. In the quiet room, Chen Daoxuan's figure disappeared instantly. When he appeared again, he was already 2,300 miles away. Teleport. After identifying the direction, Chen Daoxian continued to teleport and disappeared in place. 5 days later. Southwest of Jinyuan Xiancheng. Chen Daoxian spared a large circle and rushed from the southeast of Jinyuan Xiancheng to the southwest. The span is more than 100,000 miles. But he can use space teleportation to hurry, but he doesn't think it is too far. In the void, Chen Daoxian performed the stimulation of insects and cicadas breathing technique and invisibility technique at the same time, hiding in the void. In the distance, a large transport spirit boat flew towards Chen Daoxian from far to near. Consciousness swept away. Chen Daoxian laughed. The monks in the middle nascent soul delivered it personally. It seems that this batch of resources is quite precious. In the perfect state of the awakening of insects and cicadas, even if Chen Daoxian swept over this mid-nascent soul cultivator with his divine sense, the other party would not notice. At this moment, Chen Daoxian finally felt the pervertedness of Shenji cicada breathing technique. This secret technique is cultivated to the extreme, and it is simply the only way to sneak up on Yin people. With the consciousness fully unfolded, Chen Daoxian determined that there were no reinforcements from the Xianqing Dao League within 2,300 miles, directly revealing his figure. Chen Daoxian, dressed in white, stood in the air. In front of him, a transparent fairy sword and a light blue fairy sword were forcibly merged into one under the power of the formation. This time, as soon as Chen Daoxian came up, he used the bottom of the pressure box. In addition to consuming the star kendo map, he can be said to go all out. After all, he didn't know the strength of the middle nascent soul monks on this large transport spirit boat. Maybe the other party is like the original Zhenhai Palace, and the realm of the avenue is far beyond the cultivation base. But the result? The immortal sword fused with the 2 laws of air and water directly penetrated the chest of this unknown true monarch of the Xianqing Dao League. The next moment, the power of the terrifying law erupted. The flesh body that was integrated into the true meaning of immortality was instantly destroyed. Who? A nascent soul about 2 inches in size escaped from the destroyed body. His consciousness swept across the void, and finally found Chen Daoxian standing in the sky. In Chen Daoxuan's deliberate control of his beloved, the power of this blow was all concentrated on this true monarch nascent soul. Even the large spirit boat he was riding in was not damaged in any way. In the eyes of other monks, his immediate boss seemed to be hit by an indistinct attack, and then his body began to collapse, and a large amount of inextinguishable true meaning floated in the spirit boat cabin, causing everyone to look at each other in dismay. The next moment, they saw their immediate superior's nascent soul out of the body and flew out of the spirit boat. All these changes are too fast. With their cultivation strength, they can't tell what happened at all, and their own true sovereign nascent soul was physically destroyed. The response was good. Chen Daoxian nodded. With his current strength, he attacked a true monarch Yuan Ying with all his strength, and at the last moment, he actually let the other party escape Yuan Ying. The nascent soul true monarch's reaction was not unpleasant. But, that's it. The nascent soul cultivator's body was destroyed. Although he could not die temporarily, at least 90% of his strength was removed. This mid-Yuan Ying cultivator of the Xianqing Dao League was far worse than Chen Daoxian in strength, and now his strength is even worse. How can he fight Chen Daoxian? The cultivator in the middle nascent soul found Chen Daoxian at the moment. A horrified expression suddenly appeared on his nascent soul's fleshy little face. Chen Daoxian. Having said that, he turned and fled. Although the primordial immortal cultivator's primordial immortality can't last for a long time, compared with the physical body, the primordial immortal escaping is much faster. If some nascent soul cultivators are willing to pay the price, they can even teleport a short distance. However, before the nascent soul cultivator could teleport a short distance, a terrifying white figure stopped in front of him. Immediately, a sense of despair came over him. Done. 7017K. Chapter 342. Chen Daoxian slowly released his right hand. With an indifferent expression, he looked at the nascent soul who was strangled into nothingness by the laws of space. Until his death, he did not know the name of this mid-nascent soul monk. Unknowingly, the cultivator in the middle stage of nascent soul was in his hands, and he couldn't even hold it for a round. Although he took advantage of the sneak attack this time, even with a clear sword, the opponent would not survive 3 rounds in his hands. Chen Daoxian knew that it wasn't that the mid-nascent soul cultivator was too weak, but that he was too strong. In the legend of the Xiuxian world, the invincible real person who can compete with the Yuan Ying cultivator is a joke in front of today's Chen Daoxian. Killing ordinary true monarchs is like slaughtering dogs. This is the current Chen Daoxian. After several fights with true monarch Yuan Ying, Chen Daoxian finally had a clearer position on his own strength. With his current strength, if he uses all his cards, he should be in the first echelon below the top true monarch, and he has the strength to be infinitely close to the top true monarch. Compared with the real top true monarch, Chen Daoxian's only gap is his basic cultivation, that is, his mana is too weak, so weak that even the treasure of the stars kendo map cannot make up for it. But the improvement of the cultivation base is not something that happens overnight. Chen Daoxian suddenly missed the essence of vitality. If he has a lot of vitality essence in his hand now, he can directly push the cultivation base to the late stage of Jindan. At that time, with the treasure of the star kendo map, his strength will definitely be comparable to that of the top true monarchs. Shook his head. Chen Daoxian retracted his thoughts and turned to look at the large spirit boat in front of him. Now, this large transport spirit boat of the Xianqing Dao League, after being beheaded by Chen Daoxian with the highest combat power, slammed into a space barrier. Space cage. Chen Daoxian displayed the space cage and trapped the large spirit boat flying at high speed directly in the cage. The monks on the spirit boat didn't react until they hit the space barrier. Divine consciousness swept over, and Chen Daoxian saw the terrified faces on the spirit boat. He didn't know the monks on the spirit boat, but this was a war, and he couldn't be merciful. Seeing Chen Daoxian's grim expression, the other monks also realized their fate. I don't know which monk roared. He won't let us go, fight him. Fight, there are so many of us, even death can break one of his teeth. Kill. The first monk controlled the flying sword and attacked Chen Daoxian directly. The next moment, a series of spells followed, attacking Chen Daoxian like a tide. A time. In the void, flying swords, fire lights, and thunder lights flickered, completely drowning Chen Daoxian's tiny figure. But when these attacks were about to fall on Chen Daoxian, a layer of water curtain stood in front of Chen Daoxian. All flying swords, firelight, and lightning were blocked by this thin water curtain. Among the 5 elements law, in addition to the earth element law, the water element law is the best at defense. Using the law of water movement to resist these flying swords and spells is simply overkill. Seeing that everyone was on fire, but they couldn't even break the defense that Qin Daoxian casually laid, and everyone was desperate. Since you guys are done, it's my turn. Qin Daoxian said coldly. Say it. A transparent fairy sword quickly passed through the chests of everyone on the large spirit boat at an unbelievable speed. Only one breath. All the cultivators were strangled by Qin Daoxian's space law and became nothingness. In front of the space strangulation at the high level of the law realm, the flesh body that initially merged with the true meaning of immortality could not withstand Qin Daoxian's blow. After killing the last monk, this large transport spirit boat floated quietly in the space cage, like a ghost ship. Qin Daoxian escaped and landed on the deck of the spirit boat. The mana was swept away, and Qin Daoxian put all the resources, treasures, and storage rings of the spirit boat into the Dongtian magic weapon that he carried with him. Then it flew out of the spirit boat, and the huge spirit boat was completely destroyed with a sword, and the last teleportation disappeared in place. This battle. From his killing the Yuanying Jinjuan of the Xianqing Dao League, to beheading all the monks who transported resources, to robbing all the resources and leaving. It takes less than a cup of tea in total, and it is extremely efficient. But this is the threat posed by a sneak attack from a top true monarch who is proficient in the laws of space behind the enemy. Especially when both sides are fighting on the front lines. 3 months later. Qin Daoxian looked at the large transport spirit boat that crashed in front of him, and disappeared in place with a blank expression. The figure reappeared. Already thousands of miles away. In the past 3 months, Qin Daoxian attacked frantically, constantly attacking the transportation lines of the Xianqing Dao League to support the frontline battlefield, giving the Xianqing Dao League a headache. However, Qin Daoxian's strength is extremely strong, and sending ordinary Yuanying Jinjuan to kill him is basically a meat bun to beat a dog, and there is no return. When the top true monarch was sent to encircle and suppress it, Qin Daoxian seemed to be able to know the news in advance, and could always escape early. In addition, the top true monarchs are not Chinese cabbage. There are not many top true monarchs in the Xianqing Dao League. They are still at war with Qianyuan Jianzong, and the top true monarchs are even more dwarfed by the hands. Therefore, to encircle and suppress Qin Daoxian, the Xianqing Dao League could only squeeze toothpaste and sent 3 teams, led by top true monarchs who were proficient in the laws of space. Because the Xianqing Dao League knew that sending other top true monarchs could not kill Qin Daoxian at all. Palace Lord Yue is a typical example. The same mistake, Xianqing Dao League naturally cannot make twice. It's just that the 3 teams of Yuanying Jinjuan led by the top real monarchs, in the vast hinterland of the Xianqing Dao League, want to capture the goal of Qin Daoxian, which is too difficult. This is also why in Wan Xinghai, Qianyuan Jianzong will not easily turn against the Yuanying family. Although Qianyuan Jianzong is powerful, if a Yuanying cultivator is shameless, the damage caused is too great. Nascent Soul Cultivator has a lot of methods, and it is even more difficult to capture the opponent in the wider Wan Xinghai. Qingwei Taoism. Inside the Zongmen discussion hall. The sect master of the Qingwei Taoist sect in the first block looked extremely cold, and said coldly, "This is the first time. In just 3 months, 13 transportation routes have been destroyed. But you haven't even touched the shadow of the enemy." With that said, the gentle sect master looked at Elder He. "How does your shadowless palace do things? What's the use of the sect's need for you?" The elder surnamed he was scolded by his own suzerain, and he dared not lift his head. Call. The sect master of the Qingwei Taoist sect was angrily scolded, and slowly heaved a sigh of relief. "How about the thing I asked you to do?" The elder surnamed he cupped his hands and said, "The Jiang family said they should consider it." "Humph. Consider." The sect master of Qingwei Taoism sneered, "Tell him, take down the Qin family, and I will give him the remaining half of the treasure." Metropolitan. Hearing this, elder he hadn't spoken yet, and the expression of the elder Yun surnamed beside him changed suddenly. That treasure is extremely precious, and its effect on the sect is as great as that of the Tai Immortal Pond, so just hand it over to the Jiang family. Not to Elder Yun, of course this seat knows, but now the Dao League and Qianyuan Jianzong are at a disadvantage in the battle, and the group of grassroots in Wanxinghai dare not bet on us now. Immediately, the sect master of the Qingwei Taoist sect sighed again. This woman, Fei Qinxue, is really a good trick. In just over 400 years, she has actually cultivated such a large number of Yuanying loose cultivators who are loyal to the Qianyuan sword sect. If it weren't for this time that our Tai Immortal Pond gave birth to Tai Xinshui, Qianyuan Jianzong couldn't wait any longer, and if we gave Qianyuan Jianzong a few hundred years, the opponent's strength would probably completely surpass our Xianqing Dao League. Hear this. Elder Yun on the side nodded and said, Qianyuan Jianzong's policy towards loose cultivators does have many merits. If the Dao League survives this crisis, we must renegotiate with Zhuanyangzong about our attitude towards loose cultivators. Heard. The sect master of Qingwei Taoism waved his hand wearily. Let's discuss this matter. After speaking, the mana incarnation of the Qingwei Taoist sect master instantly disappeared from the throne. Seeing the sect master leave, the rest of the Qingwei Daoist high-level leaders either dispersed with their mana incarnations, or left in a hurry. The elder Yun was left alone and sighed secretly. He knew in his heart that the sect master was unwilling to change the attitude of the Xianqing Dao League towards loose cultivators. As a senior member of the Xianqing Dao League, Elder Yun knew in his heart that the rise of loose cultivators would bring many problems, and the first and foremost was the threat to the dominance of the Xianqing Dao League. Secondly, there is the encroachment of the high-level interests of the Xianqing Dao League. Just like Wanxinghai, the Immortal Clan in the territory of the Xianqing Dao League basically had the senior members of the Xianqing Dao League standing behind them. Including his Yun Kuan, the same is true. The rise of loose cultivators, in addition to threatening the dominance of the Xianqing Taoist League, will also encroach on the direct interests of the top officials of the Xianqing Taoist League. It is conceivable how much resistance this policy will encounter once it is implemented. Concubine Qinxue has always been opposed by the senior sect headed by the three elders in Qianyuan Jianzong. The biggest reason is this. This is still when Fei Qinxue opened up the Izumo battlefield and did not directly attack the interests of the top sect. The Xianqing Taoist League wants to learn the Qianyuan sword sect, but the resistance they encounter will only be greater. Other than that, the Qingwei Taoist sect master himself was reluctant. As the first powerhouse of the Xianqing Taoist Alliance, in addition to being the leader of the Xianqing Taoist Alliance and the suzerain of the Qingwei Taoist sect, he also has an extremely large family of cultivators behind him. If he supports the loose cultivator, the cultivator family behind him will sell a lot of benefits. How can he accept this? Cutting other people's flesh is easy, but cutting one's own flesh, how many people in the world can do it? It is said that Qin Daoxian, if he is asked to cut the flesh of the Qin family to support the loose cultivator, he will not agree. This is also one of the reasons why Fairy Qiyao recruited him on behalf of concubine Qinxue and was rejected by him. Because Qin Daoxian is a typical Xiuxian family power. The Qianyuan sword sect master and his factions are actually representatives of the interests of loose cultivators. Really speaking, Qin Daoxian should belong to the side of the third elder. Of course. Qin Daoxian himself also had a conflict of interest with the third elders. Zhangzhou was originally the private plot of the Yi family, but now it is occupied by the Qin family. One can imagine how Yi Yin feels about Qin Daoxian and the Qin family. Izumo front line. Inside the Crimson Flood Immortal City. True monarch Lin Wu was in the top seat, and beside him, each true monarch sat on the throne. Below, Jin Dan Jinren all stood, looking at Lin Wu Zhenjuan sitting on the first seat of the hall. Ha ha ha, good. 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 Lin Wu Zhenjuan put down the communication talisman in his hand and smiled happily. Aside. A late nascent soul monk smiled and cupped his hands. Why is the true monarch so happy? True monarch Linwu didn't give up. He waved his hand boldly and said, according to the news from the Shadow Palace, another logistics transportation line of the Xianqing Dao League has been destroyed. This is the 13th time that the Xianqing Dao League has been destroyed so far. A shipping line, heard. The late nascent soul cultivator was also overjoyed. He gently punched and slapped his hands and said excitedly, so, wouldn't nearly 1/3 of the logistics of the Xianqing Dao League be destroyed? Indeed so. True monarch Linwu smiled and nodded. Chen Daoxian really made a great contribution this time. I will definitely ask the sect master for his credit in this battle. Oh, Zhenjuan wants to return to the sect? The rest of the Yuanying Zhenjuan heard the words and looked at Linwu Zhenjuan in surprise. Linwu Zhenjuan has been on the front line of Izumo for hundreds of years and has become a legend in Wangxinghai. This is the first time he has expressed to everyone that he wants to return to the sect. A top true monarch whose strength and prestige are all at the peak is going to return to the Qianyuan Jianzong sect, which is a big event for the Qianyuan Jianzong. In terms of the prestige of the sect, Linwu Zhenjuan is much higher than the Zhenhai Palace Hall Master. To a certain extent, Fei Qinxue, the suzerain of the Qianyuan Sword sect, was not as prestige as the true monarch Linwu, who had guarded the front line of the Izumo kingdom for hundreds of years. The return of Linwu Zhenjuan to the sect may rechange the power structure of Qianyuan Jianzong. Hear this. True monarch Linwu laughed. I am a disciple of Qianyuan Sword sect, and of course I have to go back to the sect. Besides, if this battle is won, the Xianqing Dao League will not be able to make any waves again. Compared with Fei Qinxue, he was worried that Tai Xinxue would create a Yuanshan Taoist for the Xianqing Taoist alliance. The idea of true monarch Linwu was even more rude, that is, before the birth of Yuanshan Dao Jun in Xianqing Dao League, he would kill all the late Yuanying monks of Xianqing Dao League. At that time, the Xianqing Dao League has mastered the Tai Xinxue, and no one can break through the Yuanshan Dao Jun, so what is the use? Of course, this idea was even crazier than the Zhenhai palaces alone raiding the Qingwei Taoist sect. All the Yuanying cultivators in the Xianqing Dao League added up, there were at least hundreds of them. Even if the number of cultivators in the late nascent soul was smaller, there would have to be dozens of people. As for the level of the top true monarch, the two sects of the Xianqing Dao League together, there are exactly 20 people. No, the true monarch Qijiao has fallen, and now there are only 19 people. These 19 are the top combat power of the Xianqing Dao League. In comparison, the top true monarchs of Qianyuan Jianzong are a little less than Xianqing Dao League, only 15. But there are more Yuanying monks in Qianyuan Jianzong. In this battle, the Yuanying cultivator exposed by Qianyuan Jianzong almost made the Xianqing Dao League stunned. Rough estimate. The number of Yuanying monks exposed by Qianyuan Jianzong in this war exceeded 500. Although most of them are monks in the early and middle stages of nascent soul. But as long as these early nascent soul and mid-nascent soul cultivators did not meet the top true monarchs one-on-one, they would be able to fight each other 1 or 2 times. This is the real strength that Qianyuan Jianzong has accumulated over the past 400 years. Among the more than 500 Yuanying true monarchs, there are only more than 100 or less than 200 Yuanying cultivators who truly belong to the Qianyuan Sword sect. Among them, more than 300 people were all true monarchs of the nascent soul who were born in loose cultivators. Although none of the so many loose cultivation nascent soul true monarchs have reached the level of the top true monarchs, the number of more than 300 people still makes all the forces in Wanxinghai tremble. If it hadn't been for a complete war between Qianyuan Jianzong and Xianqing Taoist alliance, no one would have thought that Fichengsu had secretly accumulated such a terrifying strength over the past 400 years. The outside world has always thought that there are at most nearly 100 people in Wanxinghai's scattered cultivators, but they did not expect to be 3 times more than everyone guessed. 17K. Chapter 343. Twin Peaks. A figure suddenly appeared in front of a cave in Shuangsheng Peak. In front of the cave, a slender fairy was standing and waiting, looking left and right. "Are you looking for me?" A familiar voice came into Ziling's ears, which instantly made her anxiously overjoyed. "Brother Chen, you are back." Ziling took a step forward and looked at Chen Daoxian carefully. Seeing that he was safe and sound, he could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. Chen Daoxian lifted the Shenja cicada breathing technique, regained his breath, nodded and said, "This time, the Xianqing Dao alliance bit me very hard. I took them around in a circle, so I came back a little late, so you are worried." "Brother Chen is fine." Ziling lightly clutched her chest, looking like she was hesitant to say anything. "If the fairy has something to say, just say it." Heard. Ziling bit her lip lightly and said, "My concubine knows that Brother Chen is eager to break the enemy, but you have repeatedly attacked the logistics transportation line of the Xianqing Dao League during this period of time, and you will inevitably be hunted down by the Xianqing Dao League. If this goes on, I'm afraid. I'm afraid, Brother Chen, you will be in danger. After all, this is the hinterland of the Xianqing Dao League, and no matter how the Qianyuan sword sect has an advantage in the frontal battlefield, it will not affect this place, so." Chen Daoxian smiled lightly. "Fairy means to let me take it as soon as I see it?" Ziling hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "That's exactly what I meant." "Indulge for a moment." Chen Daoxian frowned and said, "If the fairy feels that it is not safe to follow her, she can leave at any time, and Chen will never stop her." "You." Hearing this, Ziling's eyes suddenly turned red. "Why do you miss me so much? Could it be that in your eyes, am I the kind of person who is greedy for life and fear of death?" "Very good, since Fairy and Chen are not people who are greedy for life and fear of death, why are they afraid of being chased by the Xianqing Dao League?" Ziling was speechless by Chen Daoxuan's words for a long time. Her chest kept rising and falling. After a long time, I saw her disappear in front of Chen Daoxuan's cave. Seeing her leave, Chen Daoxian couldn't help but stroke his forehead and sighed, "Women are trouble." After all, he waved his sleeves. Boom! The door of the cave opened, and Chen Daoxian walked in. A quiet room in the cave. Chen Daoxian sat cross-legged and counted the harvest of this looting of the Xianqing Dao League transportation line. Opening the Dongtian artifact, a large amount of precious resources surged out of the Dongtian artifact at once, and instantly covered the floor of the quiet room. This is still a part of Chen Daoxuan's thousands of choices, selected from the Xianqing Dao League transport ship. The transportation spirit boat of the Xianqing Dao League is to transport supplies to the Xianqing on the front line. The resources loaded inside are simply massive, and Chen Daoxuan's cave artifact alone cannot hold it at all. In desperation, Chen Daoxian had to choose the most essential parts to take away. As for other resources, he had to destroy them on the spot, so as not to make the Xianqing Dao alliance cheap. That's it. The resources of this plunder, Chen Daoxuan's secluded quiet room still can't hold it. One can imagine how terrifying the resources Chen Daoxian plundered, and it is no wonder that the Xianqing Dao League was chasing him all over the world. Looking at the resources in front of him, Chen Daoxian took out a jade bottle, which contained 100 drops of the power of creation. For other true monarchs, although these powers of good fortune are rare, they are not the most precious, but for Chen Daoxian, these 100 drops of power of good fortune are definitely the most precious of all treasures. It is a pity that among the resources that Xianqing Dao League transports every time, there are not many resources such as the power of creation. After looting 13 times, less than 500 drops of the power of creation have been accumulated in total. Chen Daoxian sighed and shook his head. In fact, this is also normal. The power of creation that the Xianqing Dao Alliance transported to the front line is for the use of Yuanning Zhenjuan to repair the magic weapon, not for the frontline Yuanning Zhenjuan to promote his own magic weapon. So of course the quota per shipment will not be too high. In the transportation line of the Xianqing Dao League, the real resources are the various spiritual pills, magic weapons, magic charms and other resources used by the middle and low-level monks. The resources used by high-level cultivators account for less. Because the number of high-level monks is still too small compared to the huge low-level monks. This war, which was hailed by other forces as the decisive battle between Qianyuan Jianzong and Xianqing Dao League, was by no means only the high-level cultivators who were desperately fighting. Actually, as Lingwu Xianqing launched the first shot to attack the Xianqing Dao League, Qianyuan Jianzong integrated all the forces that could be integrated and went straight to the hinterland of the Xianqing Dao League. The most violent attack was launched to the Xianqing Dao League. In this kind of life-and-death battle, the casualty rate of low-level monks is much higher than that of high-level monks. Compare. Because the Cangzhou cultivator recovered Jinan Pass and Qindao Xian was alone in the hinterland of the Xianqing Dao League, Qianyuan Jianzong did not order the Jinan army to continue to attack. Instead, they ordered them to stay at Zenengguan in situ. Therefore, in this decisive battle, Cangzhou was the one with the least losses among the states. As for the other states of Wan Xinghai, they all dispatched monks to follow Qianyuan Jianzong and launched the most violent attack on Xianqing Dao League. In this regard, even the Jiang family who flirted with the Xianqing Dao alliance was no exception. The Jiang family also sent a large number of clan elites to Yunmengguan to attack the nearest Xianguan of the Xianqing Dao League. Against this background, the logistical pressure of the Xianqing Dao League can be imagined. At this time, unruly monks like Qindao Xian appeared in the hinterland of the Xianqing Dao League, frantically destroying their logistics and transportation lines, resulting in frequent lack of resources for the frontline monks and serious damage to their combat power. In the face of such a situation, the Xianqing Dao League can't bear it. A large number of true monarchs were sent to hunt down Qindao Xian. But the strange thing is that although they used all means to hunt down Qindao Xian, the other party could always predict their arrival in advance. After chasing and killing for so long, there has never been a real face-to-face between the two sides. The closest true monarch of the Xianqing Dao League was to Qindao Xian was this time. Qindao Xian was captured by the divine consciousness of a top true monarch, but after he took the other party around for a long time, he finally used the Mi Qin fan to directly escape 100,000 miles away. Let the other party stare blankly in place. Think of this. Qindao Xian took out the jade talisman that was seized from Master Yingjiu. After watching it, he said with emotion, "I didn't expect you to play such a big role this time." The situation that the jade talisman in the mouth of Yin Vulture really works has not appeared. Qindao Xian robbed the Xianqing Dao League 13 times this time, and 4 of them were forewarned by this jade talisman, which allowed him to avoid the ambush set by the enemy. It can be said that Qindao Xian is now able to stand here safely and steadily, and this jade talisman is indispensable. You must know that in order to arrest Qindao Xian, the top true monarchs sent by the Xianqing Dao League are all proficient in the laws of space. Once they are stuck by the opponent, Qindao Xian will definitely not be able to escape so easily. Although teleportation is a stunt of escape, it is not absolutely invincible. Otherwise, all the monks in the Shuxian world must have sharpened their heads and wanted to understand the laws of space. Under normal circumstances, true sovereign Yuanying holds the Dao domain magic weapon and uses the Dao domain to suppress the void, which can limit the enemy's teleportation. In addition, a true monarch who is proficient in the laws of space can prevent the teleportation of a true monarch who also understands the laws of space. As for the top true monarchs whose Dao realm has reached the world realm, they can completely achieve the level of one thought of the world, and one thought of the world's destruction. In front of such a top true monarch, teleportation is simply a joke. If Qindao Xian encounters the top true monarch in the world, the only way is to use all means to shatter the opponent's world, and then use teleportation to escape. But the difficulty of breaking the opponent's world is no less than directly defeating the top true monarch in this world. Totally impossible. That is to say, if Qin Daoxian really encountered the top true monarch in the world, he could not escape, and he would definitely die. This is also very clear in his heart. In the Xianqing Dao alliance, apart from the dead red flood dragon, there are 19 top-notch true monarchs. Among these 19 top true monarchs, how many people have reached the world realm, not to mention Qin Daoxian, even Qianyuan Jianzong knows nothing. Just like the Xianqing Dao League did not know that the owner of Jinhai Palace had reached the world realm. The strength of a top powerhouse like the Hall Master of Jinhai Palace is the biggest secret of each force, and it is related to the survival of the sect, and it will not be revealed at all. Even with Qin Daoxuan's strength and status, he still doesn't know the strength of the Jinhai Hall's master. Not to mention the hostile Xianqing Dao League. For a long time, the Xianqing Dao League thought that it had done a very good job of infiltrating the Qianyuan sword sect, but this battle obviously slapped the Xianqing Dao League in the face. Not to mention the information of the highest level of Qianyuan Jianzong, they did not even investigate the number of Qianyuan Jianzong Sanqiuzhenjuan. In this regard, the Xianqing Dao League can only say that this woman, concubine Qinxue, is too sinister. Such a terrifying strength, even a strength far surpassing the three elders and the neutral faction of the sect, she actually hid it for hundreds of years. What is even more unbelievable is that, over the past 400 years, Fei Qinxue has faced the third elder's difficulties and aggressiveness more than once, but she just endured it and did not reveal the power she secretly accumulated. Until this decisive battle with the Xianqing Dao League, the Xianqing Dao League was caught off guard. Faced with such a severe situation, the Qingwei Taoist faction and the Xianyang sect had to frantically dispatch the Yuanying Zhenjuan in the sect to go to the front line of the Izumo kingdom for support. Unconsciously, the number of true monarchs left behind by the Qingwei Taoist faction was already less than 10. It can be said that this is the weakest defense in the history of Xianyang sect and Qingwei Taoist sect. But the Xianqing Dao League had no choice. The hidden strength of Qianyuan sword sect was too terrifying. They couldn't help but work hard. If they didn't fight, Qianyuan sword sect would hit their nest all the way. Quiet indoors. Qin Daoxian sat on the Wenyu futon. In front of him, a light blue fairy sword about 3 inches long was suspended quietly. In front of the futon, 5 jade vases line up. In Qin Daoxuan's hand, he lightly held a jade talisman. He glanced at the jade talisman, and then at the immortal sword that was constantly circling, thinking secretly in his heart. For Qin Daoxian. Using the power of good fortune to promote the flying snow sword is undoubtedly the fastest way to improve the strength. But even if this method can improve his strength, at most it will only improve his law of water movement from the first stage of the law to the high stage of the law. After the law of water movement is raised to the high level of the law, the degree of fusion of the law of air and water will inevitably decrease. In this way, Qin Daoxuan's strongest attack method may not be able to strengthen much. At most, his strength can be improved to the level comparable to Palace Lord Yue. To be frank, the strength of the Palace Master Yue is not weak, but it is nothing to participate in the Jinhai Palace Master's raid on the Qingwei Taoist faction with such strength. After all, the Qingwei Taoism is a sect force of the same level as the Qianyuan sword sect. Who knows what is hidden in the other's nest? Even if the other sect has no secret hands, the Qingwei Taoist sect master and the remaining true monarchs are all real top powerhouses. It would be extremely difficult for him and Jinhai Palace to fight at the opponent's home court alone, even if they were a sneak attack. Unless Qin Daoxuan's strength can suddenly increase to the same level as the Hall Master of Jinhai Palace. Otherwise, infinitely close to the top true monarch and the top true monarch, the role in this raid is not much different. But using the power of good fortune in front of him to repair the jade talisman left by the real Yin vulture is different. Qin Daoxian had already personally experienced the function of this jade talisman. One word, strong. He escaped from the pursuit and ambush of the Xianqing Dao League several times, relying on this jade talisman to give early warning. But at the same time, this jade talisman also has a disadvantage: sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. Although Chen Daoxian has not encountered the time when it is not working, it is impossible for him to put his destiny on it. He had to make sure that this jade talisman would play a role when he and the Zhenhai Hall master raided the Qingwei Taoist sect. Think of this. Chen Daoxian immediately made a decision in his heart. Repair the jade talisman. Although he didn't know whether the 497 drops of the power of creation could completely repair this jade talisman, he was willing to gamble once. Say it again. After this repair, even if the jade talisman cannot be completely restored, the effect of early warning will inevitably be further enhanced. At that time, if he wants the power of creation, he will go to Xianqing Dao League to grab it. With this damaged jade talisman, the Xianqing Dao League has no way to take Chen Daoxian, let alone after this jade talisman is repaired. Chen Daoxian opened a jade bottle. Inside the bottle, a drop of the chalcedony-like power of fortune gently rippling in the bottle. Chen Daoxian picked up the jade talisman with his left hand and the jade bottle with his right hand, and slowly dumped the jade bottle. Shichichi. Drop by drop of the power of good fortune like chalcedony, dripping on the jade talisman. Next one. The blood-colored crack in the middle of the jade talisman became smaller, visible to the naked eye. Effective. Seeing this, Chen Daoxian looked happy. Laugh. 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 Chen Daoxian felt distressed as the power of creation continued to pour on the jade talisman. If these powers of creation are used to improve the law of water movement, his two laws can reach the high level of the law. But soon, Chen Daoxian put this reluctance behind him. Because Chen Daoxian knows what is most important to him now. On the jade talisman. The small cracks on the edges were repaired one after another, and only the most important one in the middle was still stubbornly listed on the jade talisman. Soon, the power of creation in the fourth jade bottle bottomed out. Looking at the jade bottle with only the last 100 drops of the power of creation left, Chen Daoxian's heart slammed, and he released the ban and dumped it on the jade talisman. Shichichi. The sound of hot water entering the oil pan sounded again. This time, the crack in the middle of the jade talisman finally changed. I saw that the biggest crack, like the original tiny crack on the edge, slowly healed together. Just before the last drop of the power of creation fell, a dazzling brilliance flashed on the jade talisman, and the crack completely disappeared. Success! Seeing that it took 496 drops of the power of creation, the jade talisman was finally repaired by him, Chen Daoxian couldn't help shouting excitedly. He gently rubbed the jade talisman in his hand. Divine consciousness probed towards the jade talisman again. Different from the previous state when true monarch Yin Vulture was damaged, this time, the thoroughly repaired jade talisman showed Chen Daoxian all its information. Chapter 344. Heavenly Amulet. From the information revealed by this jade talisman, Chen Daoxian learned its real name. Unexpectedly, this heavenly secret talisman is actually one of the components of a 7th-order magic weapon. Chen Daoxian frowned. The magical instruments are generally divided into 1st order to 7th order from low to high. Further up is the pure yang immortal artifact. Most of the pure yang immortal artifacts in the immortal cultivation world are used by the sect forces to suppress the luck. Ordinary monks rarely have pure yang immortal artifacts by their side, and even Yuanshan Daojun is no exception. Of course, the sect forces that can master the pure yang immortal artifact are basically the first-class forces in Xianyun continent, and the second-rate forces with pure yang immortal artifact like Qianyuan Jianzong are second-rate even in the entire Xianyun continent. Number. It can only be said that the ancestors of the Qianyuan sword sect were quite rich. Apart from the pure yang fairy weapon, the 7th-order magic tool is the apex of the magic tool that monks can use. Even if many of the instruments used by Tianzuan Du Jia are only 7th order, it can be seen that this kind of instrument is precious. In the realm of immortality, pure young true immortals have not appeared for hundreds of thousands of years, and the transcending tribulation period is the real peak of this world, and these transcending tribulation Tianzuan will not pay attention to the battles between various forces in order to transcend tribulation and become immortals. For them, transcending the calamity and becoming an immortal is within easy reach, and if they cross it, they can live together with the sky. If it cannot be crossed, tens of thousands of years of ascetic practice will be turned into a bubble and become a handful of lusts. As long as you're not a fool, you know how to choose. Unless it is the two realms that start the war again, the heavenly venerate transcends tribulation will never pay attention to these vulgar things. Therefore, in the competition for the interests of the sects, Yuanshan Daojun is the strongest fighting force. If you want to take action for the sake of the sect, unless a party wants to destroy the sect where this robbery Tianzuan is, then the robbery Tianzuan will simply ignore it. Just like the war between Qianyuan Jianzong and Xianqing Taoist alliance, in normal times, the Yuanying monks on both sides would not take action at all. Only in such a decisive battle that concerns the survival of the sect, the nascent soul monks on both sides will make a move regardless. In contrast, the conditions for transcending tribulation Tianzan's shot are more stringent. Because these transcending tribulation heavenly venerates not only have to consider the consequences of the shot, but also consider their own immortal path. Therefore, in Xianyun continent, the most active sects are not the ancient forces that have Du Jie Tianzuan, but the sects that have Yuanshan Daojun. Those sect forces that have Du Jie Tianzuan in charge are more low-key than the other. Usually, these ancient forces only operate within their own sphere of influence, and they don't even bother to communicate with other forces when they go out, let alone fight for interests with other forces. As for other so-called first-class forces, they dare not provoke these ancient forces. Because they know that they can be called first-class forces because the real powerhouse never speaks. Otherwise, Yuanshan Daojun would not have the slightest power to fight back in front of Du Jie Tianzuan. After accepting the information on the Tianji talisman, Chen Daoxian silently retracted his consciousness. I didn't expect that a mere jade talisman could be so big. Chen Daoxian raised his head, his brows stretched. The real Injiu is also lucky to actually hold such a heavy treasure without knowing it. And yes, as the real Injiu, where can I gather 500 drops of the power of good fortune to repair this treasure? To be clear, a drop of the power of creation requires a year for a cultivator in the early nascent soul to extract it from the spirit stone. Although with the cultivation of the nascent soul cultivator, especially the improvement of the soul, the speed of extracting the power of creation will also become faster. But no matter how it is improved, it is extremely rare for a late nascent soul cultivator to extract 100 drops of the power of creation in 1 year. Because no matter how powerful the soul of a Yuanying cultivator is, its spiritual consciousness can cover a radius of 100,000 miles, which is the ultimate. If you want to break through this extreme, only the cultivation base can break through to the primordial spirit stage. In other words, the spiritual consciousness covers a radius of 100,000 miles, which is the threshold of the soul of the primordial spirit period. Such an existence can only extract 100 drops of the power of creation a year, which shows the preciousness of the power of creation. 500 drops of the power of creation means that an ordinary primordial spirit Taoist would take 5 years to extract. A late-stage Jindan cultivator in Yinjiuzhenjin district, how could he have such a big face to ask the nascent soul cultivator in the sect to extract so much power of creation for him? However, this Tianji talisman is a treasure of Zion Yunzu Taiyin sect, a treasure called Venerable Tianji. Chen Daoxian thought about it carefully, but he had heard of Taiyin sect. This sect was an ancient force in Zion Yunzu. The reason why Chen Daoxian has seen this name is that he happened to see it in the historical archives of Qianyuan Jianzong's rush to aid Liang Jiuan. As for the taboo name Venerable Tianji of the Taiyin sect, he really doesn't know. But immediately, Chen Daoxian was relieved. How many years has he practiced so far? After a lot of calculations, it has only been less than 50 years since he started to practice at the Red Copper Mountain on Shuanghu Island. 50 years of time, for such transcending tribulation heavenly venerate, it is not even a flick of a finger. For these transcending tribulation heavenly venerates, fame and fortune are like floating clouds. Overcoming the calamity and becoming a true immortal is the only pursuit of these heavenly venerates. In addition, they only have the slightest responsibility to maintain their own line of Taoism from being destroyed by external forces. As for letting their group expand their territory for the sect and compete for interests, let's take a nap. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxian shook his head. Venerable Tianji is too far away for him to transcend tribulation, and his current cultivation level is not even at the nascent soul stage, only at the early stage of Jindan. There are still 3 major realms away from the tribulation period, and the gap between them is incalculable. The only thing he is interested in now is this completely restored heavenly secret charm. As one of the components of the 7th order magic weapon, this heavenly talisman also has a 7th order low grade. Chen Daoxian murmured, I didn't expect the completely repaired heavenly secret talisman to be able to proactively predict bad luck, it's really amazing. Knowing the function of the heavenly secret talisman, Chen Daoxian was not hypocritical, and immediately used it to make predictions for himself. A thought moves. Chen Daoxian instilled his idea of raiding the Qingwei Taoist sect into the heavenly secret talisman. The next moment, the heavenly secret talisman appeared red like blood. Jade talismans are like blood, fierce. Chen Daoxuan's face was ashen. Although he knew that it was extremely dangerous to go to the Qingwei Taoist sect to capture the Tai Shin Shui, he did not expect it to be so dangerous. You must know that he plundered the logistics and transportation routes of the Xianqing Dao League 13 times, and was chased and killed by the top true monarch several times. This heavenly secret talisman has never had such a violent reaction. Only this time. Chen Daoxian just revealed the idea of raiding the Qingwei Taoist faction, and the heavenly secret talisman had such a big reaction. Seeing the ominous omen predicted on the heavenly secret talisman, Chen Daoxian fell silent. According to his temperament, since he knew that this trip was a life-and-death experience, he would definitely retire temporarily and talk about it after a while. Anyway, with his chance and talent, the Mahayana true immortal dare not say that he is almost 100% sure that he will achieve transcending tribulation heavenly venerate in the future. And reaching the transcendence period, with the inheritance he received in Wanxinghai, there might be a means to make him transcend the calamity successfully, and his longevity is equal to the sky. Immortal. This is almost impossible in the eyes of countless monks, but Chen Daoxian has a great grasp. Does he really want to give up the chance to become an immortal for Qin Xianhe to get involved in this dangerous situation? Think of this. Chen Daoxian gasped violently. One is the temptation to become an immortal, and the other is Uncle 13, who treats him like a nephew and has no reservations about him. At this moment, Chen Daoxian hesitated. Chen Daoxian couldn't help recalling the scene when he saw Qin Xianhe for the first time. This is Copper Mountain. An old man with gray beard, holding a 5-year-old child, said kindly. Our ancestors of the Qin family have all cultivated here. The old man smiled and turned his head. You will also practice here in the future. You are a Taoist. From today onwards, you will be called Qin Daoxian. Qin Daoxian. The child raised his head and looked at the tall old man. Daoxian, what do you think this is? Qin Xianhezhen took out a jade slip. Qin Daoxian, who was in his early 10 years, took the jade slip and looked at Qin Xianhe curiously. Uncle 13, this is our family's most precious heritage of refining. In order to get it, our family has paid too much. The expression on Qin Xian's face was a little gloomy. Qin Daoxian took the jade slip with his tender hands. As a 10-year-old child with an adult soul in his body, he understood the heaviness on Qin Xian's face. He knew that this little jade slip must be very difficult to get. Qin Daoxian nodded solemnly. Uncle 13, I will definitely live up to your expectations. Hearing this, Qin Xianhe looked at him, and in Qin Daoxuan's eyes, he saw something called hope. For a time, Qin Ziyan's eyes were a little wet. The Battle of Tsangzhou Corpse Tide. Qin Xianhe took a heavy-faced Qin Daoxian to visit Qitong Mountain again. That is Copper Mountain. Qin Xianhe pointed to a bare mountain top, a little sighed. Everything in my Qin family starts from this spiritual mine. Uncle 13. Dao Xian, Qin Xianhe looked at him. I tell you this because I want to tell you that no matter what the future of the family is in the future, I will not blame you, nor will the clansmen blame you. Because, you have already done everything for your family. Dao Xian, you are worthy of any clan. Quiet indoors. Qin Daoxian couldn't help but burst into tears. Qin Ziyan's words were still in his ears. Dao Xian, you are worthy of any clan. Are you ashamed? Qin Daoxian evaporated his tears with manna. No, I am ashamed. I have neither repaid the kindness of Uncle 13 for raising him nor Uncle 13 for his enlightenment. How dare I say that I am worthy of any clan? Qin Daoxian raised his head. His eyes were like the stars under the night sky, bright and firm. Uncle 13, wait for me. I will definitely bring back Tai Shinshui for you, so that you can successfully build your foundation. Southwest waters of Wangxinghai. Twin Lakes Island. In an exquisite courtyard, the sun shines on the rockery flowers in the courtyard. In the courtyard, on a reclining chair made of warm jade, lay a rickety old man. The old man's face was covered with scars, his skin was wrinkled, and he looked like he was about to die. Qin Xianhe raised his hand slightly. Beside him, a cultivator of the Qin family who was serving him bent down and approached Qin Ziyan's ear. Old Patriarch, what are your orders? Qin Xianhe opened his turbid eyes, and a blurry shadow came into view. After a while, the blurry shadow gradually became clearer, but he still couldn't see the appearance of this Qin family junior in front of him. He only knew that the other party's name seemed to be Qin Zirui. Tell Dao Yan to come here. Qin Xianhe was a little weak. Yes. Qin Zirui bowed his hands and flew out of the courtyard with a flash of light. Less than a moment. 2 rays of light landed on this courtyard. It was Qin Zirui and Qin Daoyan who came in a hurry. Seeing Qin Xianhe, Qin Daoyan hurriedly squatted down and greeted him in his ear. Old Patriarch, are you looking for me? Hearing this, Qin Xianhe smiled and said, Daoyan, I'm afraid I'm running out of time. Hear this. Qin Daolian's heart shook violently. With trembling hands, she lightly held Qin Ziyan's dry palm, tears rolled down her cheeks, and she shook her head. No, the young patriarch will definitely have a solution. You said, you have to wait for the young patriarch to come back. Haven't you seen with your own eyes that the young patriarch took revenge for the family? Aside, the other Qin clan juniors also sobbed softly. Qin Xianhe has a very high status not only in Qin Daoxuan's heart, but also in the hearts of the Qin family. Over the years, Qin Xianhe put all the power of the family in the hands of Qin Daoxian, but he cultivated generations of younger disciples for the Qin family. Until he ran out of energy and grew old. Seeing Qin Daolian's appearance, Qin Xianhe smiled and comforted. Silly child, how can people not die? If you don't have the Dao, it's all empty after all. Qin Daoyan lowered her head and sobbed, unable to speak at all. Daoyan, I'm afraid that I can't wait for Daoxian. There are some things I want you to tell him. Qin Daoyan cried and nodded. You tell him for me that the proudest and most proud thing in my life is to bring him back from Chongping County to Qitong Mountain to practice. Qin Daoyan whimpered and... Qin Daoyan seemed to sense something, and raised her head alertly. Who dares to trespass my Tsangzhou Qin house? Say it. Qin Daoyan closely guarded Qin Xianhe behind him. Interesting. An unfamiliar voice rang in Qin Daolian's ears. Then, a figure suddenly appeared. Seeing this person in front of her, Qin Daolian's eyes showed a hint of panic. Jiang. Ancestor Jiang. Ancestor Jiang was wearing a black robe. He was just standing quietly in the courtyard, as if he was the center of everyone. When Qin Daoyan saw the ancestor of the Jiang family, her delicate body trembled violently. Half an hour. Only then did she suppress the fear in her heart and said slowly, I don't know why Patriarch Jiang suddenly visited my Qin family, why? Jiang Laozu did not answer, but nodded with a smile. Interesting, you are a mere cultivator in the early period of Zifu, seeing that I can still be so calm, your Qin family is really talented. Hear this. Qin Daoyan resisted her anger. After all, her Qin family is also the largest clan in Sangzhou, and as the acting patriarch of the Qin family, although her cultivation is not high, she also represents the face of the Qin family. Just being raided by the other party to the hinterland of Chen's house, and even making jokes, anyone would be angry. Looking at Qin Daolian's burning expression, Jiang Laozu shook his head and said, Don't look at me like that, I have no ill intentions towards your Qin family. Saying that, he turned to look at Qin Xianhe. I came here because I wanted to invite Patriarch Chen to visit my Xiancheng, Jie city, and discuss the matter of conquering the Xianqing Dao League. Patriarch Chen, what do you think? Chapter 345. Old Patriarch. Old Patriarch. Amidst the exclamations, Qin Xianhe supported the armrest of the reclining chair and stood up tremblingly. He raised his head, looked at old ancestor Jiang standing with his hands behind his back, and cupped his hands, please. Seeing that Qin Xianhe is so funny, Jiang Laozu couldn't help laughing. Interesting, he said, closing his eyes slightly. After a long while, he opened his eyes, and the corners of his mouth curled up. I found it. In no time, a young woman was taken and photographed by him out of thin air. Midair. Luo Liqiu's face was full of horror. She wanted to struggle, but found that her whole body seemed to be imprisoned, and she couldn't control her body at all. See this scene. Chen Xian's expression finally changed. He stared at old ancestor Jiang, and said solemnly, to be a guest in Jie Xiancheng, the old man alone is enough. Ancestor Jiang shook his head and said, the crusade against the Xianqing Dao alliance is a big deal, so it is more appropriate to invite the two patriarchs of the Qin family to the scene together. Since the patriarch Qin Shao is not there, it is also reasonable to invite his Taoist companion to attend on his behalf, on the field. Qin Daoyan and all the younger disciples of the Qin family all blushed. They wanted to scold, but found that they couldn't even open their mouths to speak. They can stand in front of Jiang Laozu, but this Jiang Laozu is merciful. Otherwise, with their highest level of cultivation, they would all be kneeling in front of old ancestor Jiang at this moment. Qin Daoyan opened her eyes angrily, and her eyes were faintly bleeding. But no matter how angry, she can't do anything now, she can only watch everything happen. Seeing this, Qin Xianhe took a deep breath. He looked back at the Qin clan, then nodded to Luo Li, and finally, he turned his attention to Jiang Laozu. Patriarch Jiang, you should be able to see that the old man's time is running out. Qin Xianhe trembled. Perhaps the old man can't stop you from kidnapping the two of us, but I can decide whether you are taking the old man or the old man's corpse. Hear this. Old ancestor Jiang, who was originally smiling, was silent. He looked at the old man in front of him who could be blown down by a gust of wind, and couldn't help but ponder. To be honest, the Jiang family didn't want to stand in line too early in the battle between Qianyuan Jianzong and Xianqing Taoist League, but the Jiang family couldn't refuse the price offered by Xianqing Taoist League. But at the same time, Chen Daoxuan's performance on the front line made old ancestor Jiang jealous. This is a terrifying enemy with infinite potential. Especially since this enemy is still alive. Although the Xianqing Daomeng said that they would definitely solve Qin Daoxian, and would not let the Jiang family have any worries, but if the Xianqing Daoxian really could solve Qin Daoxian, would they still pay such a high price to ask the Jiang family to take action? Since Qin Daoxian is alive, his Jiang family cannot do anything. Otherwise, he wouldn't talk so much with the Chen family this time, and invited Chen Xianhe and Luo Li under the guise of discussing the crusade against the Xianqing Dao League. He didn't say a word for a long time, and directly kidnapped the two. After all, the current Chen family does not have a cultivator worthy of the Jiang family's attention. Right now, the most powerful people in the Chen family are just a dozen or so sword cultivators of the Zifu period. This strength, perhaps Jindan cultivator will pay attention to one or two when he encounters it, but for Jiang Laozu, a late nascent soul cultivator, he is not even qualified to face it. Ancestor Jiang looked directly into Qin Ziyan's eyes, and Qin Xianhe looked at him without giving up. A cultivator of the 9th level of qi refining, and a late nascent soul cultivator looked at each other. In the eyes of outsiders, this scene is undoubtedly sensational. But for Qin Xianhe, who put his life and death aside, even if the real immortal came in person at this moment, he could not let him take a half step back. Ancestor Jiang waved his hand and sighed, "Qin Xianhe, you won." The words just finished. All the restraints on the Qin clan members disappeared, including Luo Li, who also regained control over their bodies. Just as the Qin clan recovered, all the Qin clan members took out the magic weapon together, and wanted to attack Jiang Laozu, making a gesture of perishing together. "Stop!" A roar stunned the crowd. "Old Patriarch?" Qin Daoyan had blood and tears in her eyes. "Old Patriarch! Old Patriarch!" The Qin family's juniors all around had red eyes, and their bodies trembled uncontrollably. Shame! What a shame! The Qin family has been based on Shuanghu Island for hundreds of years. It has prospered and declined, but there has never been a day as shameful as today. The leader of a clan was kidnapped by outsiders in front of the clan. Qin Xianhe looked at him with blood-red eyes, his face full of ravines trembled, and said solemnly, "You should live better than to die with blood and courage, and live to see the enemy's pain and mourning with your own eyes." That day, Old Patriarch. Qin Daolian's nails pierced deeply into the palm of his hand, and blood was flowing. "Alive, there is hope." After Qin Xianhe finished speaking, he turned to look at old ancestor Jiang, and stood with his hands behind his back. "Patriarch Jiang, let's go, this moment." Ancestor Jiang's face no longer had the slightest relaxed look. He looked deeply at the red-eyed but calm Qin clan, and suddenly felt a little regretful in his heart. After Qin Daoxuan's tossing in the rear, the Yuanying level combat power is even more nervous. It's not that Xianqing Daomeng didn't think of imitating Qin Daoxian and imitating him to do things in the hinterland of Wangxinghai. But they sent a Yuanying Zhenjuan, who was proficient in the laws of space, to detour into the hinterland of Wangxinghai after untold hardships. As a result, the Yuanying Zhenjuan had just destroyed a logistics transportation line of Qianyuan Jianzong, when Kong Mingchan clan brought Qianyuan Jianzong's top Zhenjuan to the door, and directly beat him to death. At this point, the Xianqing Dao League no longer dared to send people indiscriminately. The Kongming toad family are notorious dog noses and are extremely proficient in spatial positioning. Back then, the real Shinjue was hiding in the Shinjue Immortal Mansion so secretly that it was dug up by the patriarch of the Kongming-chan clan. However, this is not the way to go. Chen Daoxian secretly said. He could feel that the Xianqing Dao League had become more and more impatient with him, and assumed a stance that he would never give up until he was caught. To know. The two major sects of the Xianqing Dao League, plus the Yuanying family under the two sects, really want to mobilize all of them. The Yuanying Zhenjuan they can dispatch is no less than Qianyuan Jianzong. Although the front line of Qianyuan sword sect involved the great energy of the Xianqing Dao League, the Xianqing Dao League really had a way to seize Qin Daoxuan's trace regardless of whether it wanted to. If nothing else, just send dozens or hundreds of nascent soul true monarchs to expand their respective Dao domains and block the Jinyuan immortal city's sphere of influence little by little. In this way, Qin Daoxuan's teleportation was completely abolished. With the continuous looting, Chen Daoxian also found that the probability of him encountering the Yuanying Zhenjuan of the Xianqing Dao League recently became more and more likely. This proves that the Xianqing Dao League is about to seize his place, which is not good news. Think of this. Chen Daoxian put away the flying snow sword, which had been promoted to the 5th rank middle rank, and glanced at the star sword Dao map that had been integrated into the third mind, ready to leave Shuangshangfeng. Since this time, in addition to repairing the heavenly secret talisman, Chen Daoxian invested all the power of good fortune he had captured into the flying snow sword, and finally promoted it to the 5th rank mid-rank. His law of water movement has also been promoted to the middle of the law realm. In addition, he also separated a mind from the sea of divine light and integrated it into the star kendo map. At this point, he was able to control Fei Shue, Qingying and Xingqian Kendo at the same time. The last time I fought with the Palace Master Yuyue, Chen Daoxian suffered a small loss in this regard. It stands to reason that if he fights with the Palace Master Yuyue recklessly, even if he loses to the opponent, it is more than enough to block the opponent's attack with Yue using the star kendo map. But as a result, after he lost the duel, he was a tad slower to cast the star's kendo map. This is because all of his mind is used to control the two fusion laws of air and water. When he is defeated, he thinks about using the star kendo map to resist the enemy's attack, which is already a little slow. The problem revealed here is that Chen Daoxian cannot control these three instruments at the same time. Controlling three instruments at the same time, and letting each instrument exert the greatest power that Chen Daoxian can exert, is not a simple matter. Because as the rank of the magic weapon continues to increase, the difficulty for monks to control the magic weapon will continue to increase. This is also the reason why after the cultivator's cultivation has improved, he does not have 10 or 8 magical instruments in his hands. The path of greed for more and never to rot is the same for monks. Control many instruments at the same time, each instrument cannot exert its maximum power, it is better to concentrate on controlling one. Therefore, even high-level monks usually only prepare one piece of various types of instruments. It is rare to see Chen Daoxian controlling 2 offensive instruments at the same time. After all, the Fei Shue sword and the Qingying sword are 2 separate instruments, not a set of instruments. This is still the current popularization of the spiritual armor in the world of immortality. Before the advent of the defensive spirit armor, the cultivator's defensive magic weapon was not a spirit armor, but a variety of shield-shaped magic weapons, which also required the cultivator to control it himself. In this way, the cultivator has to control both the defensive magic weapon and the attacking magic weapon. At the same time, both sides cannot exert their greatest power. This has always been criticized by monks. Until the advent of the spirit armor, the shield-type defensive instruments were gradually eliminated, and the monks did not need to concentrate on controlling the defensive instruments, but only needed to focus on attacking. As for the defensive spirit armor, it is only necessary for the cultivator to separate a very small part of his mind and continuously inject mana into it. Like Chen Daoxian's power spirit armor, it doesn't even need to consume this little thought. Its energy supply system is the 4th grade Good Fortune White Lotus embedded in the chest. There is no need for Chen Daoxian to worry at all. In this way, what Chen Daoxian has to do is to keep attacking. Especially after he learned that dividing the sea, he carved the word offensive into his bones. And the continuous attack is also in line with the swordsmanship, and it can give full play to the power of the fairy sword. This is also one of the reasons why Chen Daoxian can play against the top true monarch. The space law in the high section of the law realm and the water movement law in the middle section of the law realm, but the fusion degree of the two has dropped, only about 40%, and the attack power is not much different from before. Chen Daoxian shook his head. This situation is exactly the same as what he thought before. His law realm has improved, but the degree of fusion of the two laws has decreased with the improvement of the law realm. This is normal for Yuanying monks. For monks above the nascent soul stage, Not only must they work the understanding of the law, but also on the integration of the law. Because the fusion of laws is the key to the sixth stage of the Great Tao realm, world realm. There are two kinds of laws, one reaches the high level of the law realm, and the other reaches the first stage of the law realm, and the fusion of the two reaches 50%, which is the minimum standard for a top true monarch. The three laws all reach the high level of the law realm, and the fusion degree of the three reaches more than 50%. This is the premise of breaking through the world realm. This kind of monk is also a top true monarch. This shows how big the gap between the top true monarchs is. It's time to leave. Chen Daoxian muttered. Chapter 346. Twin Peaks. Xiling stood on a spiritual mountain, staring at the clouds in the sky. Brush. A white figure suddenly appeared in front of her. Seeing the figure in front of her, Xiling was stunned for a moment, and then said, "Are you leaving again?" Chen Daoxian first nodded, then shook his head again. "I'm going, but this time I'm not going to loot the Xianqing Dao League," he thought for a while. "I may be away for a long time this time. Fairy can wait here, or choose to leave on her own." Hear this. Ziling's heart trembled slightly, she raised her head and said at a loss, "Where can I go?" "This." Chen Daoxian frowned and sighed, "If that's the case, then you can wait here." "Say it." Chen Daoxuan's figure disappeared, leaving a young woman full of uneasiness, standing on Lingfeng in a daze. The border between Qingyuan and Izumo is a country to the southeast. At the same time, the Qingyuan kingdom is also the traditional sphere of influence of the Qingwei Taoist sect. In the early years of Qianyuan Jianzong's control of Chuyun Kingdom, the sphere of influence of the Qingwei Taoist faction was only the Qingyuan Kingdom. Unlike today, most of the territory of Izumo is divided by Zhuaniangzong and Qingwei Taoism. Although Qingyuan and Izumo are adjacent to each other, the two countries are very vast. Even if Chen Daoxian used space teleportation all the way, it took several days to completely enter the hinterland of Qingyuan Kingdom. Compared with the turbulent situation in the Izumo Kingdom, where the Qianyuan Sword Sect and the Xianqing Dao League were in full swing, the Qingyuan Kingdom was much more stable and peaceful. Chen Daoxian saw and heard all the way. Although the monks of Qingyuan Kingdom are also very concerned about the war between Qianyuan Jianzong and Xianqing Dao League, they do not seem to be worried that Qianyuan Jianzong can invade the territory of Qingyuan Kingdom. This confidence made Chen Daoxian very surprised. But thinking about it carefully, Qianyuan Jianzong was beaten by the Xianqing Dao League thousands of years ago like a bereaved dog, and fled to Wangxinghai, which was extremely barren in the eyes of the monks in Xian Yunzhu, and became a foreign cultivator. Now even if they have accumulated enough strength to counterattack the Cloud Kingdom, the two sides have been at a stalemate for more than 400 years. In the view of the bottom cultivators of Qingyuan Kingdom, the so-called war launched by Qianyuan Jianzong this time was just loud thunder and little rain, which could not shake the foundation of Xianqing Dao League's rule. Not to mention attacking the Qingyuan country, the core hinterland of the Qingwei Taoism. See here. Chen Daoxian felt helpless in his heart. The peaceful days were too long, and the minds of these monks in the Qingyuan Kingdom were all muddled. In comparison, Qianyuan Jianzong implemented the policy of monks from various states to go to the front line of Izumo to fight the Xianqing Dao League, which made Wan Xinghai's whole atmosphere much more sturdy. In Chen Daoxuan's eyes, compared to the monk Wan Xinghai, the cultivator of Qingyuan country obviously lacked a murderous aura, and had a bit of extravagance for pleasure. At the same time, Chen Daoxian also noticed that Qingyuan Kingdom, Izumo Kingdom, and Wan Xinghai are much richer in various resources. No matter how many immortal islands in Wan Xinghai are, how can it be compared with the extremely fertile continent of Xianyun continent? On land, under the same area, its spiritual mines and spiritual veins are not known to be much more than Wan Xinghai. A spiritual force wants to develop. Its foundation is population, because monks are born from ordinary people. The population base of ordinary people is the cornerstone of the monk group. And the soil suitable for ordinary people to live is not the sea, but the land. In this regard, whether it is Izumo or Qingyuan, it is much more advantageous than Wan Xinghai's geographical location. It's just that the purpose of Chen Daoxuan's trip is not to visit the mountains and rivers, but to go to the Qingwei Taoist school to capture the Tai Shin Shui, otherwise he really wants to experience a different kind of customs in Qingyuan. Guilt Immortal City. The most developed and richest immortal city in the hinterland of Qingyuan Kingdom. At the same time, this is also a immortal city directly under the jurisdiction of the Qingwei Taoist sect. The Golden Immortal City is very close to where the Qingwei Taoist sect is located. According to the information Chen Daoxian learned, the distance from the Qingwei Taoist sect is less than 10,000 miles away. For a high-level cultivator, it takes less than half a cup of tea to arrive thousands of miles away, which is almost no different from keeping the eyelids low. Entering the Gilded Immortal City, Chen Daoxian found that almost no one in the city talked about the war between Qianyuan Jianzong and Xianqing Daomeng. It was as if the fighting on the front lines simply ceased to exist here. This strange picture made Chen Daoxian extremely uncomfortable. On the front line of the Izumo Kingdom, the Xianqing Taoist League was defeated by the Qianyuan Jianzong, but in the hinterland of the Qingyuan Kingdom, especially the largest immortal city at the foot of the Qingwei Taoist sect, no one cared about the frontline battle. This magical scene made Chen Daoxian feel very unreal. Cultivator of Qingyuan country, his heart is really strong. Chen Daoxian shook his head. The meeting place he agreed with the hall master of Zhenhai Palace was in this Gilded Immortal City. Chen Daoxian searched all the way, and finally arrived at the meeting place. However, compared with the time agreed by the hall master of Zhenhai Palace, Chen Daoxian came more than 6 months earlier. It's been so long since I came here, and I don't know if the token handed to me by hall master Qin is still useful. Chen Daoxian was walking on the flowery streets of the Gilded Immortal City, holding a black token in his hand, thinking secretly in his heart. Suddenly, Chen Daoxian turned around and narrowed his eyes slightly. In front of him, a man with a big belly, dressed as a wealthy businessman, with a few entourage behind him, strode towards Chen Daoxian. Nephew. When the wealthy businessman saw Chen Daoxian, he was surprised and waved to him from afar. Chen Daoxian frowned slightly when he saw this, until he heard the voice transmission in his ear, then nodded and smiled. Nephew, ashamed, I asked my uncle to pick me up so far. Ha ha ha. The wealthy businessman strode forward, patted Chen Daoxian on the shoulder suddenly, and said with a big laugh, based on my friendship with your father, this is nothing. The fat wealthy businessman waved his hand, then took Chen Daoxuan's hand and said affectionately, let's go, my aunt and I have prepared a banquet at home, just waiting for you to pick up the dust. After speaking, he couldn't help but take Chen Daoxian and walked towards a spirit beast car. Chen Daoxian did not resist, and let him pull himself onto the spirit beast car. Inside the car, the fat rich businessman chatted loudly with Chen Daoxian, and along the way, he talked a lot. Chen Daoxian also handled it skillfully. This fat rich businessman's cultivation base is not high, only in the middle stage of foundation building. The few followers around him, whose cultivation bases are similar to him, are all at the foundation building stage. In this Gilded Immortal City, a few foundation building cultivators are not eye-catching, but ordinary cultivators will not take the initiative to provoke them, but it is a good way to hide from the public. A group of people drove the spirit beast car and galloped all the way. Finally stopped in front of a manor. This manor is a place where only the middle level and above forces of the Gilded Immortal City can live. Chen Daoxuan's divine sense probed, but found that his divine sense had been bounced off by the manor's defensive formation. C. He also did not forcefully use his divine sense to break through the defensive formation of the manor. Nephew, please. Uncle is too polite. Chen Daoxian nodded and got out of the car with the fat rich businessman with a smile on his face. It wasn't until a few people entered the courtyard that the fat and wealthy businessman pushed a few followers away, and then bowed to Qin Daoxian and cupped his hands. The younger generation Shadow Palace is stationed in the Golden Immortal City, disciple, and I have seen Qin Jinren. At this moment, all the Philistine smiles on the faces of the fat and wealthy businessmen disappeared, replaced by a look of reverence and solemnity. No problem. Just as he was about to ask something, a voice sounded from the sea of consciousness, and then he waved his hand, go down first. Yes, Qin Jinren. The fat rich businessman withdrew respectfully. Qin Daoxian flew towards the back of the courtyard with a flash of light following the prompt of the sound transmission from the sea of knowledge. Next moment, Qin Daoxian was in a foreign country and met the hall master of Zhenhai Palace, who was also wearing a white Taoist robe. I saw Zhenhai Hall's hall master sitting in front of a spirit lake with misty spiritual energy, holding a bamboo pole in his hand, fishing. You came earlier than I thought. Qin Zhan put down the fishing rod in his hand and turned to look at Qin Daoxian. As he spoke, he pointed to the stone bench beside him and said, sit down and talk. Qin Daoxian was not polite, he walked straight to Qin Zhan and sat on the stone bench. A year is too long. I can't wait. I'm afraid Uncle 13 can't wait, heard. Qin Zhan nodded understandingly. Immediately, he seemed to think of something and frowned, I got a message and I've been wondering whether to tell you or not. Saying that, Qin Zhan looked directly into Qin Daoxian's eyes. Qin Daoxian looked at him indifferently, with no sign of flinching on his face. Seeing this, Qin Zhan sighed with emotion, how long has it been, that kid who didn't even dare to breathe when he saw me back then could actually look at me so calmly. After saying that, Qin Zhan laughed. Qin Daoxian seemed to think of the scene when the two met for the first time, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Forget it, let me tell you, otherwise, your kid might hate me in the future. Qin Zhan shook his head. According to the news from the Shadow Palace, old ancestor Jiang kidnapped him to the immortal city of extreme night in the name of inviting your 13th uncle to discuss a plan to defeat the enemy. Boom, heard. Qin Daoxian stood up suddenly, and the stone bench under him suddenly burst. Under the aura swept away, the spirit lake turned upside down, and the 100 million tons of lake water was agitated by Qin Daoxian's aura, and all of them were suspended in the air. If there are outsiders present at this moment, you can even see a group of spiritual fish struggling desperately in the Linghu floating in the air. In Qin Daoxian's eyes, anger almost burst out. He looked directly at Qin Zhan, and asked, does the Qianyuan sword sect let this matter go to you? I can't handle it. Qin Zhan shook his head. In the first place, old ancestor Jiang invited your 13th uncle to the immortal city of extreme night in the name of discussing ways to defeat the enemy. Second, the current Wanxinghai cannot be chaotic, do you understand? Qin Zhan looked back at Qin Daoxian. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian's heart moved slightly, but he didn't reply. Forget it, I don't want to do so much. Since we have both come this far, you must be ready to work hard with me. Seeing Qin Daoxian nodding, Qin Zhan continued, although your strength is weak, it is not useless. I can reveal part of the plan to you, and I may have to rely on you to help. Qin Daoxian heard that Qin Zhan thought he was weak, the corner of his mouth twitched slightly, but he didn't speak. Qin Zhan felt relieved when he saw Qin Daoxian's shriveled appearance. Demo, tell you to pretend in front of me. Just when Qin Zhan was about to talk about his plan, Qin Daoxian asked, when are you going to do it? Didn't I tell you the exact time? You came early. In other words, we still have more than half a year to prepare. Qin Daoxian continued to ask questions. If you have to say that, it's not impossible. Qin Zhan nodded. Understood, Qin Daoxian extended his hand to Qin Zhan, are you rich? I want to borrow some money from you. Borrow money? Qin Zhan seemed to be unable to believe his ears. Is there something wrong with the brain? Borrowing money at this time, are you going to burn it for yourself? Chapter 369. If Qin Daoxuan's actions were seen by other true monarch nascent soul, he would probably be heartbroken. The other nascent soul cultivators who were promoted to magic tools poured the power of creation onto the magic tools drop by drop. Generally, after pouring a dozen or 20 drops of the power of creation, it will stop. After a period of time, the magic weapon will completely absorb the power of creation, and then continue to pour. Because only in this way can the power of creation be maximized. There is no one like Chen Daoxian, who will pour the power of creation so desperately, with a face of a landlord and old wealth. Shichichi. The power of creation continued to drip on the cyan spirit armor. Under the transformation of the power of creation, the cyan spirit armor rapidly increased its aura. Until Chen Daoxian poured out a bottle of the power of creation, the breath of the blue spirit armor suddenly soared. The fifth order low-grade spirit armor. Chen Daoxuan's eyes lit up. The promotion of spirit armor is much more difficult than that of immortal sword, not to mention the life-staining spirit armor on Chen Daoxuan's body, which is a combination of spirit armor and fortune white lotus. The power of good fortune consumed by promotion will only be more. Fortunately, Chen Daoxian has obtained enough power of creation from Qin Zhan, and he can squander it as much as he wants. Chen Daoxian did not stop when his life spirit armor was promoted to the 5th order low grade, and he opened a bottle of jade bottle to seal the ban, and continued to pour out the power of creation. An hour later, Chen Daoxian looked at the soul armor with a powerful charm in front of him, and was very excited. The 5th order high-grade power spirit armor. Chen Daoxian stretched out his hand and saw that the cyan spirit armor quickly flowed onto his palm like a stream of water. Then, the cyan water stream followed Chen Daoxuan's right hand and wrapped his entire body. At this moment, from the outside, Chen Daoxuan's whole body was shrouded in cyan spirit armor, without a single gap. But Chen Daoxian felt that he had nothing, and he could even clearly perceive the interaction between his skin and the air. It seems that after being promoted to the 5th rank high-grade spirit armor, not only the defense power has been greatly increased, but the comfort has also risen to a large level. Chen Daoxian said with satisfaction. Compared with other true monarch nascent soul's spirit armor, Chen Daoxuan's natal spirit armor is not only stronger in defense, it is also a large mana storage. Taking a look at the spirit armor on his body, Chen Daoxian began to stimulate the mana in his dantian and continuously instill the mana into the spirit armor. The natal spirit armor was promoted to the 5th order high grade, which was a large level higher than the original 4th grade high grade. It means that the white lotus of good fortune within it has also been promoted from the 4th rank to the 5th rank. The ability of the 5th grade Good Fortune White Lotus to store mana is naturally not comparable to the 4th grade Good Fortune White Lotus. As soon as Chen Daoxuan's mana was instilled into the newly promoted 5th grade Good Luck White Lotus, he felt that the originally full mana White Lotus only had a shallow layer of mana left. And these mana are still accumulated in the early days of Chen Daoxian Jin Dan. See here. Chen Daoxian directly introduced these mana into his dantian. After the transformation of the golden elixir in the purple mansion of the dantian, it became a more pure and profound later mana of the golden elixir, and then re-infused it into the 5th grade Good Fortune White Lotus. After a stick of incense, Chen Daoxuan's complexion was slightly pale, and his dantian was empty. All the mana was instilled by him into the 5th grade Good Fortune White Lotus. But after careful perception, Chen Daoxian found that after transforming the mana left in the original 4th grade fortune-telling White Lotus and the mana of his whole body, the 5th grade fortune-telling White Lotus was far from being full of mana. Even the mana in the 5th grade Good Fortune White Lotus at this moment may not even have 1% of the mana after it is full. Seeing this, Chen Daoxian was overjoyed. He was able to compete with the true monarch nascent soul. In addition to the high realm of the great Tao, the 4th grade Good Fortune Bailey also played a big role. Because his cultivation was only in the early stage of Jindan, with the mana of the monks in the early stage of Jindan, even if he wanted to use the Tao law of the high level of the law realm, he was powerless. However, Qin Daoxian relied on the massive mana accumulated by the fourth-grade fortune-telling White Lotus, and with his cultivation in the early stage of Jindan, he displayed the space law of the high level of the law realm and the water movement law of the early stage of the law realm. Although the quality of his mana is far inferior to that of the Yuanying true monarch, the amount of mana is absolutely no worse than that of the Yuanying cultivator, or even better. Now, Qin Daoxuan's cultivation reached the late stage of Jindan, and the quality of mana was improved again. More importantly, the White Lotus of good fortune he used to store mana has been promoted from the 4th order high grade to the 5th grade high grade, and the ability to store mana has reached a higher level. It can be foreseen that when Qin Daoxian has filled all the 5th rank high-grade fortune-telling White Lotuses with mana, and then uses the Tao law, the effect will not be inferior to that of any Yuaning Zhenjuan of the same Tao realm. Even with Qin Daoxuan's late Jindan cultivation, the quality of his mana is not as good as that of the nascent soul cultivator, but the quantity of his mana is much better than that of the nascent soul cultivator, which can completely make up for the lack of quality. The gap in basic cultivation will no longer be Qin Daoxuan's shortcoming. And Qin Daoxuan's stamina far exceeds that of ordinary Yuanying true monarchs, unless other Yuanying true monarchs also have the 10,000-year stone stalactite, a treasure that can quickly restore mana, so that they can compete with Qin Daoxian. Quiet indoors. Qin Daoxian raised his head and poured the Wanyan stalactite given to him by Qi Yao into his mouth, and the mana in his dantian continued to emerge as Qin Daoxian drank the Wanyan stalactite. At the same time, Qin Daoxian continued to instill mana into the 5th grade fortune-telling White Lotus. In this way, Qin Daoxian drank the stalactite of 10,000 years, while instilling mana into the 5th grade fortune-telling White Lotus, treating himself as a machine for transforming and instilling mana. The mana in the 5th grade fortune-telling White Lotus is visible to the naked eye. 10%, 20%, 30%. 10%. It's been 5 days. With the help of Wanyan stalactite, Qin Daoxian finally filled the mana in the White Lotus of the 5th grade good fortune again. As the mana in the 5th grade good fortune White Lotus was full, the spiritual light on the blue-colored spirit armor of the birth destiny continued to flicker, and finally became calm. Qin Daoxian knew that this was a sign that the power spirit armor had sufficient energy and its defensive power had soared. So far, the matter of Qin Daoxuan's retreat and promotion of magic weapons has finally come to an end. Think about it. Qin Daoxian called out Feishue and Qingying double swords, launched the sword formation of the two ceremonies, and dragged it with the mind to forcibly merge the two laws of air and water again. Only this time, because the law of water movement has been promoted to the high level of the law, the repulsive force of the law of space and the law of water movement has also been further strengthened. Despite Qin Daoxuan's hard work, he finally found that the degree of fusion of the two laws was still reduced, only a mere 30%. See this scene. Qin Daoxuan's face was not good-looking. Although the realm of the Tao law has been promoted, the degree of fusion of the laws has been reduced. Repeatedly, the power of the fusion of the two laws of air and water has not been greatly enhanced. Qin Daoxian estimated that, considering the increase in strength brought about by the promotion of his cultivation base, he now probably has stepped into the threshold of the top true monarch, and he is still a long way from the existence of Qin Zhan. Think of this. Qin Daoxian couldn't help sinking his consciousness into the sea of consciousness. The most striking thing in the sea of knowledge is the Comprehension star with a diameter of hundreds of miles hanging in the center. This Comprehension star is one of Qin Daoxuan's biggest gains in the real fairyland. Today, under the constant consumption of Qin Daoxian, this star of understanding has shrunk by a circle, and it is no longer the spectacular sight of nearly 600 or 700 miles in diameter. In his perception, the huge star of perception in front of him is only about 500 miles in diameter. There are still about 3 months left before Qin Zhan plans to raid the Qingwei Taoist faction. Chen Daoxian decided that in the last 3 months, he would completely drain this star of comprehension. Right now, there are 2 ways to use the comprehension stars to improve their strength. The first method is to use the function of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic to improve understanding, and then comprehend a new sword intent. As for the type of sword intent, it should be Fire Xing or Jin Xing sword intent. Because Chen Daoxian still has 2 5th-order high-grade immortal swords in his hand, which are both fire and gold. Comprehending the third sword intent is very difficult. But on the premise of consuming comprehension stars, this difficulty is nothing. However, even if Chen Daoxian comprehends the third sword intent and uses the 5th-order high-grade immortal sword to promote it to the high level of the law realm, the improvement of his strength is still limited. Because Chen Daoxian already has 2 laws that have reached the high level of the law. Even if one is added, it will only bring about a further reduction in the degree of fusion of the laws. With the fusion of the 3 laws, with his formation realm, the degree of fusion of the laws may be reduced to 20% or even 10%. The 3 laws of the high level of the realm are only 10% integrated. In terms of strength, they may not be as good as the top true monarchs. It doesn't work that way. Chen Daoxian frowned, looking at it this way, I can only choose the second method. The second method in his mouth is to improve the realm of the formation. Chen Daoxian's formation level is probably only about the 4th rank low rank, which is slightly higher than his item refiner's rank. The formation realm has entered the 4th level, and if you want to make further progress, the difficulty will increase exponentially. From the 4th order array mage to the 5th order array mage, I don't know how many Tianjiao monks have to be stumped. From the 5th order breakthrough to the 6th order array master, according to Chen Daoxian's knowledge, there is only one person in the entire Wangxinghai, Hu Yanqi, the master of the Qianyuan sword sect refining hall. Of course. The breakthrough in the formation method is difficult for other monks, but not necessarily for Chen Daoxian, especially under the premise that he decides to use the comprehension stars at all costs. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxian opened his eyes and looked at the storage ring in front of the futon. This storage ring contains all kinds of formations that the Qin family has collected over the years. These formations range from high to low, with a low-grade, high-grade 5th, and even a 6th-grade array. There are several jade slips recorded in this storage ring. The formation method is not comparable to the inheritance of equipment refining and the inheritance of alchemy. In the world of immortality, the monks of the major forces have a relatively loose attitude towards inheritance. Because learning the formation method requires too much talent for the monk, not only that, even if the monk becomes a high-level formation mage, the value that can be created is extremely limited. Unlike high-level alchemists and high-level alchemists, it is the foundation of a cultivation force. In addition to arranging a great formation to protect the mountain, the array mage can play a very limited role. But for things like protecting the mountain, after a cultivation force is set up, it usually will not change for thousands of years or even tens of thousands of years. It is impossible for the formation mage to survive by setting up the mountain protection formation, right? Especially after Tian Yenzong, a sect known for its formations, invented something called an array. Even a cultivator who did not have any knowledge of formations could easily set up an formation with the aid of an array. The role of the array mage is further reduced. So far, in the coastal boundary of Xianyun continent, in addition to Tianyinzong having a large number of formation masters, there are only a handful of formation masters owned by other sections. Not to mention the array mage in loose cultivation. The formation masters of other sects, more like Hu Yanqi, are essentially a refiner. After all, high-level refiners must be proficient in the way of formation. In the end, the two have learned a lot from each other. There is a decision in mind. Chen Daoxian didn't delay any longer. With a thought, the comprehension stars in the sea of knowledge quickly turned, and a large number of comprehension stars were consumed. As the stardust of comprehension was consumed, Chen Daoxian's comprehension continued to soar with the naked eye. 10 times, 20 times, 30 times. In a blink of an eye. His comprehension broke through 100 times the limit and reached an unimaginable realm. With the improvement of his understanding, the various formations in the jade slip passed through his mind like a shooting star. Without a single meteor, it meant that Qin Dao Xian had thoroughly mastered a formation. With the size of the Qin family, the array of formations collected over the years is incomparably vast, and it is completely filled with a storage ring. But at the moment, these formations have been thoroughly eaten and chewed by Qin Dao Xian at an extremely exaggerated speed. As the knowledge of these formations was thoroughly comprehended by Qin Dao Xian, his formation realm continued to rise. The 4th order low-grade array mage, the 5th order low-grade array mage, the 5th order middle-grade array mage. A 6th order low-grade array mage. Qin Dao Xian and Qin Zhan didn't know that when they were both in retreat and guarding the Dharma, the Qingwei Daoist faction also changed a lot. Qingwei Taoism. A majestic fairy palace towers over the clouds. Inside the palace, thrones stand in majestic fairy halls. Looking around, there are at least dozens of these thrones. At this moment, those who are qualified to sit on the throne are at least true monarch nascent soul. Among them, on the 2 thrones of the highest head, 2 monks were seated respectively. If the hall master of Jinhai Palace was present, he would probably exclaim. Because the person sitting next to Yi Tianqi was none other than the sect master of Xianyang sect, the true lord of Xinhua, Wu Sheng. Compared to Yi Tianqi's feminine face, Xinhua Jinjuan Wu Sheng's face is much rougher. Leader, why are you so eager to recruit us? Wu Sheng glanced at Yi Tianqi and thought about it. Wu Sheng was really curious. After all, the Qianyuan sword sect was pressing forward step by step, and the entire country of Izumo had lost 70%. Before long, the entire country of Izumo will fall completely. At that time, it will be the turn of Xianyang sect and Qingwei Taoism. Wu Sheng would not be naive to think that after the Qianyuan sword sect launched such a violent offensive, it would stop after taking down the Izumo kingdom. Junior brother Wu, don't be impatient. Yi Tianqi glanced at him gently, and then looked at everyone. I know that the battle on the Izumo country's front line is urgent, but I am recalling you on this occasion. There must be something more important than the Izumo country's front line. What's more important? I don't know what's the matter. Yi Tianqi's remarks made everyone in the Xianyang sect talk about it. On the other hand, the Yuanying Jinjuan of the Qingwei Taoist sect was at ease. Obviously, they already knew the existence of Tai Shinshui. After a while, the discussion stopped. Yi Tianqi asked, everyone, what do you think we will win or lose in this battle? Hearing this, everyone frowned. In this battle, Qianyuan Jianzong's road was like a broken bamboo, and the strength it burst out was far beyond the expectations of the Xianqing Dao League. All the senior officials of the Xianqing Dao League did not expect that the strength of Qianyuan Jianzong has increased to such a level after more than 400 years of fighting to support wars. 400 years ago, the two sides were still at a stalemate in Izumo. Qianyuan Jianzong won a small half of Izumo by sneak attack, but now, Qianyuan Jianzong and Xianqing Dao League are in a battle of arms and horses, but Xianqing Dao League is not an opponent at all, which is really unexpected. Seeing the heavy expressions on everyone's faces, Yi Tianqi continued, I think everyone knows in their hearts that my Xianqing Dao alliance is extremely dangerous in this battle. Even if the Qianyuan sword sect won the Izumo kingdom and stopped moving forward, but with the resources of the Izumo kingdom, after hundreds of years, how can my Xianqing Dao League survive? What the ally said is very true. Yes. Ugh. When everyone heard the words, they all sighed. But Yi Tianqi stood up from the throne, my Xianqing Dao League is not without a chance of winning, even our chance of winning is much greater than that of Qianyuan Jianzong. Hearing this, Shen Wu couldn't hold back his inner curiosity any longer, and cupped his hands. I don't know what the victory in the mouth of the leader means. Tai Shinshui. Boom. What? In an instant, there was chaos in the hall. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.